Well, we got more photos last night with a clearer image. We got footage of him running across the roof and climbing down from the roof. So last night at 10 p.m., law enforcement did not have this suspect in custody. So all of this has happened overnight and in the early hours of the morning. The pastor likely recognized those photos either earlier in the morning or potentially after those clear images were released later last night. But like we were saying earlier, just one tip makes all the difference. Law enforcement needed help from the public. That's why they went public with those images. In fact, they even delayed that. They could have sent those images out yesterday morning. They waited until a little bit later in the day, and that's what did the trick. I think for our viewers, people need to realize that the public's help in identifying suspects is crucial in cases like this, and that's exactly what happened.
And Anna, this time yesterday, you were here with me at the desk as we were digesting the first news conference from investigators, and it jumped out to both of us that while they said they had images, they had video, they had security footage, they didn't actually release it yesterday morning. They waited until about midday to release the images that we've been showing now. More video was released later in the day, and then we had news of this, I believe, $100,000 reward for information about that would lead to the apprehension of this suspect. How do investigators decide what to release and when, considering the politically charged moment we're in?
Well, they're weighing the pros and cons. So a calculation was made yesterday morning at that 9 a.m. press conference that you and I were monitoring. They decided that they didn't want the flood of misinformation, misidentifying people, because they were so confident that surveillance footage from campus from the minutes before the shooting was so good, was such high quality, they were going to be able to identify him. But guess what? They couldn't. And by about noon, a few hours later, they still didn't even have an ID on the suspect, let alone know where he was. And that's when they said, wait a minute, guys, we need to reevaluate. We need to put these images out. We need help from the public.
If you're just joining us, we're covering the breaking news that this hour, President Trump announced that investigators have a suspect in custody connected to the assassination of conservative activist Charlie Kirk. CBS News correspondent Carter Evans is in Orem, Utah, where the shooting took place, and joins us now with an update on reaction there. Carter, this has all just happened in the past few minutes, so I'm not sure if you've had reaction yet, but speak to us about the dragnet that investigators threw out and how it seems to, at this point, have led to a development.
Yeah, I expect that a lot of people are going to be very happy to hear this news as they're waking up. It's about 6:30 in the morning here right now. We've got a news conference coming up in just about a half an hour on campus there, where we're going to find out a lot more details about this arrest. But as you mentioned, the dragnet, I mean, there was a tremendous number of resources poured into this investigation, searching for this individual, canvassing. We talked about 7,000 tips came in. They followed up on all of them. That takes a lot of manpower. They interviewed more than 200 people, and they were also getting video and pictures uploaded by people who thought that they might have captured something on their home surveillance cameras. And they say they got as many videos uploaded as they did during the Boston bombing back in 2013. So they had a lot of information to work with. But then we had that news conference last night where we were kind of here at the scene expecting to hear news about progress in the investigation, possibly a name of this individual. We did not hear that last night. Instead, we got more surveillance video, which you showed, showing that individual on top of the roof where the shots were fired from, jumping down. And then we saw these still images of that individual. Now, those images had been released earlier in the day, but they were a little bit blurry. You could still get a very good look at this alleged shooter's face. He was wearing sunglasses. But when those enhanced images came out last night, I was thinking to myself, someone is going to recognize this guy. certainly his family, if they see this picture plastered on TV all over the country, they're going to recognize this. Someone is going to find this guy soon, and it appears that is exactly what happened. Not sure of the timeline on how or when this happened, perhaps overnight. But as you said, the president just learned about this about 5 minutes before he went on air with Fox News. So he had very limited details himself, and we're looking forward to learning a lot more in about a half an hour.
That's right. On that point, Carter, President Trump said this is what he thinks. He says this is subject to change, but according to information that was given to him before he appeared on Fox News this hour, the suspect is in custody. And according to the series of events that President Trump lays out, a minister involved with law enforcement contacted the suspect's father and convinced them to turn him in. President Trump said they drove into the police headquarters, and he's there now. CBS News senior producer for our investigative unit, Pat Milton, joins us now on the phone with what you're learning. Pat, what can you provide that helps us understand what's happening at this moment?
Yes, we have calls all out to our law enforcement sources, and we're trying to confirm what President Trump is reporting. We've had a couple of false starts, so we're trying to be very cautious. But it sounds from President Trump's reporting that they have a high degree of certainty that they do have the correct person in custody at this time. But we're trying to get that confirmed.
All right, Pat, we have just an audio issue with your signal. We'll try to correct that as soon as we can. But Pat Milton has reached out to her contacts in law enforcement to try and confirm what we've just heard from President Trump. At this early moment, we've only heard it from President Trump, and CBS News wants to confirm this through our official sources. CBS News correspondent Natalie Brand joins us from the White House with what's new there. Natalie, help us understand why President Trump was here in New York this morning and how he came to appear on a cable news channel in announcing this development.
Yeah, the president traveled to New York from D.C. yesterday afternoon. He attended the Yankees game, had this interview with Fox News this morning where he made this breaking news announcement saying with a high degree of certainty we have the suspect in custody. Now, again, as you mentioned, we are still waiting for official confirmation, but the president breaking this news on Fox News, also talking about his relationship with Kirk, almost like a family member. That's something that we've been talking about since this happened, just the closeness between Charlie Kirk and this White House, especially given Kirk's influence and role that he helped to play during campaign season, and not just the last presidential campaign, but in ones prior, in mobilizing the youth vote and as serving as such a close ally and advisor to President Trump, and also to Vice President J.D. Vance, who he had an extremely close relationship with. So close that J.D. Vance flew yesterday to Salt Lake City to retrieve Kirk's body and then deliver it home to Arizona yesterday on Air Force Two with Kirk's wife there as well, greeted by supporters in Phoenix, and that's where he will be laid to rest. The president yesterday telling reporters that he expects he will attend the funeral. But of course, as there's been this outpouring of grief, shock, and horror here at the White House, this intense investigation has been underway. And the most details that we have about the latest developments come from the president himself in announcing a suspect in custody, according to the president, saying that his federal law enforcement worked with local police, the governor, that everyone in Utah did a great job. And he also announced that somebody close to the suspect turned him in. We know this followed that outpouring of tips that were called in to local and federal authorities, around 7,000 tips, according to the latest reporting we had. But again, what we are hearing is coming from the president himself. A lot more reporting still to be done. But again, you could really hear in the president's remarks today and yesterday when he paid tribute to Kirk at the 9/11 memorial over at the Pentagon. This was like a family member to him, so much so that he's also going to be giving Kirk the Presidential Medal of Freedom posthumously. That's the highest civilian honor, Errol.
And you also have Republican Congresswoman Nancy Mace moving to have Kirk lie in honor in the Capitol, just to underscore how significant conservatives feel that Kirk was to their dominance during the last election. And we made a point about President Trump announcing this during an interview. I just want to add some of the caveats that he mentioned. He says he says this could change. And the anchors pressed him on whether or not there was any ideology evident from the suspect, and the president did not want to elaborate on that. He avoided answering that question, and he says officials will be able to announce all of this later on today. Natalie, could you tell us where we will expect to see the president the rest of the day?
The president is heading to his home at Bedminster, where he's expected to stay for the weekend. Again, it's typical that he travels to one of his other properties on the weekend. And again, it's unique that he was in New York yesterday for the Yankees game, following attending a 9/11 remembrance here in D.C., and then for this big Fox News interview. One other note, given that in the wake of this, we are hearing about elected officials and lawmakers canceling political events that they had scheduled for this weekend, especially the fear of any outdoor events. The president asked about just the overall violence and climate of political violence, and he said we have to go on. But obviously everyone over on Capitol Hill, anyone thinking about holding big events, are now rethinking their own security plans and having to postpone events just because of the fear of what happened on Wednesday.
Natalie Brand joining us from the White House with the latest there. Natalie, thank you. And if you are just joining us, the breaking news is that President Trump announced within the past 30 minutes or so that a suspect is in custody in the assassination of conservative activist Charlie Kirk. We want to play you what the president said in his own words moments ago.
With a high degree of certainty, we have him in custody, right? In custody. Everyone did a great job. We worked with the local police, the governor. Everybody did a great job. Getting somebody that you start off with absolutely nothing. And we started off with a clip that made him look like an ant that was almost useless. We just saw there was somebody up there. And so much work has been done over the last 2.5 days. It's amazing, actually, when you start off with that and then all of a sudden you get lucky or talent or whatever it is. But, I think we're in great shape. Mr. President. He's in custody.
And the president also elaborated that a priest or a minister got in contact with the suspect's father and ultimately convinced him to turn himself in. The president also said they drove into police headquarters and he's there now. CBS News reporter Andres Gutierrez is in Orem, Utah, where this assassination attempt took place. Andres, how do these developments appear to you this morning?
Well, at this point, it goes to speak how quickly law enforcement has been able to make their work carried out. At this point, we're not even 48 hours since the incident occurred, and they now have supposedly someone in custody. Important to note that this minister that the president referenced also, I guess, had some close ties to the U.S. Marshal Service, who ended up getting involved in this investigation about 24 hours ago. We do know that the FBI Director Kash Patel arrived yesterday afternoon, along with the Deputy Director, Dan Bongino. Both of them were at that news conference last night. They did not speak, but hopefully they will shed some light as to how this arrest went down at some point in the overnight hours, where exactly this individual was arrested. Because, again, we know that the father and the minister drove into police headquarters, again, according to the president. We still have not heard official confirmation from law enforcement. We're working our sources here at CBS News, and we are waiting for them to have this news conference to shed some light. But again, the amount of resources dedicated to this, we've had federal, state, and local law enforcement all collaborating. The nerve center of the investigation happening here on the campus of Utah Valley University at the Fugel Center. They essentially have cordoned this entire area off. That's where they have collaborated and pulled together all their resources. 7,000 tips have come in. Majority of those those, cell phone video, as well as Ring doorbell cameras. They're saying they have not seen this amount of response from the public since the Boston Marathon bombing, and so they've talked to 200 witnesses thus far. That, you know, if you could imagine, the majority of those probably these students that were out here on Wednesday when all of this ended up occurring. There were 3,000 individuals in attendance. They ended up then going ahead and releasing those videos and images of the suspect yesterday. And as my colleague Carter Evans pointed out, they ended up releasing those enhanced photographs, which were really the best and clearer images that we've seen of this individual. So if anyone recognized him, like a family member, if it was gotten blasted out there, you would have thought that someone would recognize him and come forward, and apparently a minister did. And that's how the ball got rolling here. So hopefully this news conference will shed some light as to how exactly this arrest ended up going down.
And we were just looking at a live shot of where we believe that press conference will take place in fewer than 20 minutes from now. They typically do audio checks before the investigators come to the podium. If they announce anything significant, we'll bring that to our viewers early. But Andres, you were speaking about how it's likely that the images and video that were released yesterday could have led to this suspect being taken into custody. Investigators also said they were receiving misinformation and plenty of leads that led them in the wrong direction. Can you help us understand the mood on this campus as it became a national focus of an assassination attempt and how it's impacted people there?
I was talking to some students, and they say, you know, this is a university that usually gets overshadowed. They get a lot of, you know, BYU that's nearby and Utah State mostly get the attention, but this is not the kind of attention they want. They don't want to be known for the assassination of such a high figure like Charlie Kirk, and so they didn't want this, but they will now be known for this particular incident. Overall, I think there's going to be a lot of people waking up and breathing a sigh of relief that they have caught this individual. We don't know the motive yet. Hopefully now that they will have a chance to interrogate him, we will have an opportunity to learn what, you know, writings there may be found. You can imagine that right now likely a search warrant will be executed at the home of this individual to shed some light as to the ideology as to what may have motivated him. But I think it also goes to show you how calculated this all was. If you look at that video, he knew how to get off of that building. Didn't seem like he suffered an injury right afterwards. There is that TMZ video that's been circulating of the moments before the shooting as he's walking towards the campus where he's kind of limping. But then there is a shot afterwards where he is essentially seen running across a construction site. So it didn't seem like after that, after he leapt from that building, he ended up suffering from an injury. So overall, we're just trying to figure out, you know, why he was motivated by this. The governor has said that they have been working with the attorneys out here, that they will seek the death penalty in this case. The president says that he wants this death penalty to be imposed in this case. And so we'll see how it all ends up panning out when this case is brought forth to trial.
Andres Gutierrez is in Orem, Utah, where it's about 6:45 in the morning. Folks there, as Andres just said, will be waking up potentially with a sigh of relief to the news this morning from President Trump that the suspect behind the assassination of Charlie Kirk is in custody. You're looking at the podium where we expect a press conference from the FBI to take place within the next 15 minutes to flesh out the details laid out by President Trump this hour. CBS News senior coordinating producer of crime and public safety, Anna Schechter, is on the line with us as we try to figure out what this all really means, Anna. Andres there mentioned that President Trump also said this morning that he hopes this suspect gets the death penalty. Now that someone potentially is in custody, what additional data and information will investigators have access to that could help them build a case that leads to the death penalty?
Well, this is a game changer if this is, in fact, the suspect, because investigators can interview this person, can recover the cell phone, laptop, other electronic devices, recover all those electronic communications. that this person might have had. Also, any other social media. Has this individual potentially had interactions with Charlie Kirk in the past or made threats online in the past? All of that will go to this. Now, the hand print, the palm print, the forearm print, shoe print, investigators are carefully collecting that because prosecutors will want to, as you just referred to, build a case. And the suspect will have, of course, a defense team that will be defending him. So if this is, in fact, the suspect, we are at the beginning of a long road to justice.
As we stand by for new information from investigators, I want to pick up on the storyline that President Trump laid out. He seemed to suggest that a person of faith, a minister, who had close contact with law enforcement, convinced the suspect's father to have the suspect turn himself in. And President Trump says that they're at police headquarters and he's there now. Does the fact that the suspect turned himself in change at all the calculation for the punishment he would likely receive if found guilty?
Well, not necessarily. What it changes is how challenging the case is going to be for prosecutors, if he's, fighting it or not. But the Utah governor said yesterday that they want to file state charges and pursue the death penalty in the state of Utah. Now, given the high level of interest, I imagine federal charges are also going to come down, and Pam Bondi, the U.S. Attorney General, has said she's going to seek the death penalty in all cases available, and that was on an edict from President Donald Trump. So certainly there is going to be a major push for that in this particular case, whether or not he pleads guilty or not.
And it reminds me of the case we saw from December into January of Luigi Mangione, who was accused of killing United Healthcare CEO Brian Thompson here in New York City, where there were local charges and federal charges. There was a dramatic scene when that suspect was brought to Manhattan with the mayor and other people who didn't necessarily need to be there, but wanted to visibly show that they had brought this suspect to justice. And behind the scenes, there was almost a bit of jockeying between the White House and federal authorities and New York state and local officials. Is that possible here as well, where the death penalty would be valid under Utah law, but perhaps the federal authorities might want something different?
I see this playing out differently in this case. It appears that the Utah officials are very much aligned with federal officials, but of course, I could be surprised. But you're absolutely right. The district attorney, Alvin Bragg, and federal prosecutors have had a lot of tension over the Mangione case. Who's going to go first? Who takes the case? In this case, given the national reach of Charlie Kirk and his politics and the way this story is playing out, I imagine the feds and the state authorities are going to work together. I imagine a federal case will proceed first if they choose to file those charges. And it looked to me from watching all of these press conferences that the governor of Utah is very much wanting to work with federal prosecutors, help in the case, have his teams, have the state attorneys work with federal attorneys to proceed in this instance.
As we stand by for an official update from investigators, which we expect within the next 8 minutes or so, I just want to recap the breaking news for our viewers, which is that this hour, President Trump, while appearing on a cable news network program, said that a suspect is in custody with a high degree of certainty and that he is brought to police headquarters. He's there now, turned in by his family and those close to him. Anna, we are a day plus from when this horrific shooting took place in front of thousands of people, initially persons of interest were detained and then let go. That led to some confusion when the FBI director even sent out a message too early saying the suspect had been captured. Were there some missteps early on in the chase to get a suspect in custody?
There were missteps made. There was a level of confidence that they had the right person when immediately after the shooting, they did take a man into custody and then then they took a second man into custody. Within a few hours of the FBI posted to X to millions for everyone to see that a suspect was in custody. I think that led to a level of comfort amongst even investigators themselves. They felt like they had the right person, and that just gave the individual more time to flee. Now, mistakes can be made in investigations. Investigative work is painstaking. It's challenging. They were starting from zero, in part because the surveillance footage they pulled, he was wearing sunglasses and a baseball cap. Facial recognition software did not clearly identify who it was. So in luck and getting those photos out, that decision to make to publicize the images of this individual appear to have been key to having this person turn themselves in. As you laid out before, a pastor convinced the father of this individual to turn himself in. It is pretty stunning to have the President of the United States go live on the air 5 minutes after learning of this information and publicizing it. There is a chance that this isn't the right person, but the level of detail that Trump was able to provide in his public statements, it does appear to be a very, very strong lead.
Anna Schechter giving us her insight on the phone this morning on the news from President Trump that a suspect in the death of Charlie Kirk is now in custody. You're looking at a podium where we expect a press update from the FBI to begin possibly within the next 5 minutes, but this is a fluid moment this morning, and that could start earlier or later. CBS News correspondent Natalie Brand is following all of this from the White House, and it's clear, Natalie, that in this horrific incident, President Trump has actually led with some of the most significant developments in announcing on social media that Charlie Kirk had died, and today announcing on one of his favorite news networks that's favorable to him that a suspect is in custody. Talk to us about that and anything new you're learning at this moment.
Yeah, and that's really because of the closeness of the relationship between Kirk and the president and his team here. We know this was a top priority of the administration to try to catch the suspect in this case. And the president also mentioning that he had just found out before this interview this morning on Fox and Friends, but he did give an intense amount of detail, as you and Anna and Andres have been discussing, about how this unfolded, that it was someone who, saw the law enforcement's outcry for help in this case, for identifying the suspect, and someone close to the suspect who turned him in, according to the president. Of course, we're all waiting to hear these details from law enforcement officials themselves. But we do know that, a huge number of federal resources were thrown onto this case, with the FBI director making his way to Utah yesterday afternoon or evening, and appearing at that evening news conference where law enforcement officials released additional images of the suspect, additional video of the suspect, and gave more details about where he may have gone after the shooting incident, again, in an attempt to get the public involved. And as you've been reporting, thousands of tips poured in, interviews with around 200 individuals led to the suspect potentially being in custody, as the president has detailed. Now, back to the relationship between Kirk and the president, vice president, and his team. I mean, given the fact that Kirk really helped mobilize turnout during the past election campaign, the past campaign season, and even prior to that, Kirk was considered like a member of the Trump family. And the vice president yesterday went to Utah himself on Air Force Two to retrieve Kirk's body, deliver it home to Arizona, to Phoenix, where Turning Point USA was headquartered. And President himself announcing that he will likely attend Kirk's funeral again, which will be held in Arizona. The president yesterday telling reporters as well that he's concerned for the country in the wake of the political violence we are seeing. He was asked how he wants to see supporters respond to Kirk's death, and he said with nonviolence, that Charlie was an advocate for nonviolence, and that is the way he would like people to respond. Errol.
And just in our last few seconds with you, Natalie, where might we expect to see or not the president the rest of the day? What is his schedule?
He's heading to his weekend residence in Bedminster, New Jersey. So we are not sure whether we will hear from the president again, whether he will gaggle with the pool that is traveling with him. That's possible as they, travel with him to his weekend location. But again, I think what we will hear from first is federal law enforcement trying to give us some of the details about this case, the latest developments that the president reported first.
Natalie Brand is reporting the latest for us from the White House after President Trump announced that a suspect is in custody in the assassination of conservative activist Charlie Kirk. If you are just joining us, I'm Errol Barnett at the CBS Broadcast Center here in New York City, where we are digesting this news from President Trump as he announced this in the past hour on a conservative news channel here in New York City. The president was here, attended a baseball game, and in this morning's conversation, he felt the need to share information that was provided to him moments before he stepped into the studio and on set with the co-hosts of Fox and Friends. President Trump saying he thinks with a high degree of certainty we have him in custody. President Trump mentioning that someone close to the suspect turned him in. He wouldn't answer a question posed to him from those co-hosts about ideology of the suspect, but President Trump did provide some additional details that a person of faith, a minister, went to a U.S. Marshal and convinced that the suspect, through his own father, to turn himself in to police. President Trump says they drove to police headquarters and he is there now. It's 9 a.m. here on the East Coast in New York City. I'm Errol Barnett. There is a press conference out of Utah being brought to us by the FBI with new information on a potential suspect in custody in the shooting death of Charlie Kirk. Our new information is that that press conference is scheduled to begin in approximately 30 minutes. You're looking at a live feed coming to us from there now as they check audio. We want to play with you sound from President Trump last hour as he broke this news.
I think with a high degree of certainty, we have him in custody, right? In custody. Everyone did a great job. We worked with the local police, the governor. Everybody did a great job. Getting somebody that you start off with absolutely nothing. And we started off with a clip that made him look like an ant that was almost useless. We just saw there was somebody up there. And so much work has been done over the last 2.5 days. It's amazing, actually, when you start off with that and then all of a sudden you get lucky or talent or whatever it is. But, I think we're in great shape. Mr. President. He's in custody.
Doug Coons is a former special agent for the FBI and founder and CEO of Veracity IIR. Doug, thanks for being with us. This news just breaking from President Trump in the past hour. How do you interpret some of the details the president is providing and what it means to the investigation overall?
It's great news. I would disagree with his comment about the luck aspect. This was a lot of hard work by a lot of people using the best technology and tools available. And I am not surprised that he was caught. There's too many cameras out there. There are too many skilled investigators, talented investigators using these tools that they have available. Some things that people aren't necessarily even aware of, but cell phone tracking and that kind of thing. So it's just hats off to these guys that were crying in for hours on this. I'm sure watching hours and hours of videotape, hundreds of interviews of potential witnesses, and what looks like a successful conclusion. You got to remember, this is still a suspect.
That's right. And Doug, help us fill in some of the blanks as we wait to hear the official word from the FBI, because as you've just mentioned, they had more than 7,000 tips, more than 200 interviews with people who felt they could provide something. They also put up this cash reward. There was a phone number, a website for people to reach out to if they had information. And of course, yesterday we saw images, grainy images, but images nonetheless, and video of the suspect. In the end, it appears, according to President Trump, that someone close to the suspect actually turned him in. So which likely was the strongest lead for investigators in getting to this point today? Take us behind the scenes and how that would have worked.
That's hard to say. You always get so many tips. It's a double-edged sword that, people mean well and they call it in, but it's 99% noise. You still have to check it out, and it takes your resources, but you never know when you're going to get that one good tip that comes in that leads you to the suspect. So it'll be interesting to see, what it was that actually did lead them to him. I would say it's a combination of a lot of the things. Certainly somebody close to this person may not have known that they had done it until they saw these videos that were released by the media and say, hey, that looks like so-and-so. So that'll be interesting just to see exactly what it was. There's probably, I think I read there were footprints that were lifted. I don't know about fingerprints, but I think there was a palm print. All these things will come into the prosecution then, because they still have to prove that he is the right person.
And in that pursuit of proving that he's the right person, there will likely possibly be digital evidence, communication, any emails, any text messages the suspect would have sent. I'm curious about the biggest questions you have at this stage, because what was notable to me was that this was an open-air, outdoor, highly publicized event on a college campus with thousands of people present, and yet this suspect seemed to have been able to fire a shot, cross over a rooftop, and run away while other people were detained. What was lost in those early hours, and what are some of the other unanswered questions you have?
Well, certainly in hindsight, there was a deficiency in the security at this event. Charlie Kirk is a controversial figure, well known, but he's not actually a politician. He's not in office. He just supports, the conservative movement, and has for years, especially amongst young people. When the shots start firing, there's always this confusion. People start scrambling, and perhaps somebody gave a tip to law enforcement that they saw someone running from a certain area, and they grabbed that person, and it looked like a strong suspect at first. But once you actually do the investigation, you realize, hey, this isn't right. We need to keep looking. When you're in these outdoor events, we spoke about this the other day. They're just very difficult to lock down. The access control is almost non-existent. I don't believe they had any kind of metal detectors or screening. I think that I did read there were tickets sold, but they weren't checked at any kind of a gate. So it's really just kind of a free-for-all for whoever wants to come, if the reporting is accurate. It's just a security nightmare, and it's not like he's an actual politician that's afforded a government security detail. That, I understand he does have his own security detail, but I don't know how many people or how robust it is. Do they do any kind of advanced work where they're coming out and making sure that rooftops are secure like a presidential detail would? I just don't know the answer to those things. But certainly moving forward, all you can do is learn from the mistakes that were made, put them into, in your best practices and do better the next time. And hopefully this doesn't happen again. But as we've seen with Trump last summer at the event in Iowa, even with a professional detail, they can still find the gaps. And it's never foolproof.
Doug Coons, we appreciate your insight on this breaking news this morning that President Trump says the suspect in the shooting death of Charlie Kirk is in custody. You're looking at live pictures coming to us from Orem, Utah, where a press conference by the FBI is scheduled to begin in approximately 20 minutes. But again, this is a fluid situation. That time could move forward or backwards. CBS News correspondent Carter Evans, I believe, has made his way there to where this press conference will begin. Carter, what updates do you have for us?
Well, we're waiting to get more details about this arrest and exactly how it went down. And as you said, we're hoping for this news conference to start in about 20 minutes right now. But they did let us know that it could be delayed further. They've got a lot of things to pull together here. What we do know is what the president said on Fox News this morning, that it appears that a minister or a pastor convinced the father of this individual to turn himself in, and they went to a U.S. Marshal's office. The president also said he was 28 or 29 years old. When you look at the picture, that seems to be about right. Initially, they had said this individual looked to be college age, but the president's saying 28 or 29. The president did issue a word of caution because he had just heard this about 5 minutes before he went on air. But we are getting details now that basically suggest that this person is in custody right now, and the president is calling for a swift trial and that this person face the death penalty. Now, last night, authorities here released some new video. Well, we've been looking at it all morning. It shows an individual on the rooftop. This is after the shooting. He runs across the rooftop, jumps down into the grass, and that's where authorities say they found a handprint and they found a foot impression. And then not far from there, they found what they say is the murder weapon, a rifle, 30-06 rifle, in a wooded area. And I asked them when they found that rifle if they were able to get any DNA or fingerprints off of that to possibly identify the shooter, and they said that that was something that they were working on. So we don't know exactly how they identified this individual or if they knew his name before. It sounds like he turned himself in, but we're hoping to learn a lot more when this news conference gets underway.
Carter Evans, thank you for that. We'll, of course, connect back with you as soon as there's new information there out of Utah. We now want to jump to Brian Botig on the phone. He's a former assistant director at the FBI. He can help us understand in general how these things come together. Brian, good morning to you. I first just want to get your reaction to what we're witnessing in this past hour. President Trump briefing the public based on something he was told moments before he was in a studio, and effectively breaking the news that potentially a suspect is now in custody.
I think it's very interesting that the president made the announcement and used a little bit of a disclaimer in here that he's pretty certain because of the failure of some of the communications earlier by the FBI announcing that somebody was in custody.
And Brian, we're just having a slight technical issue with your audio. I'm going to try and get one more question to you, if you can just bear with us. What do you expect the FBI to lay out this morning, and what should we listen for to see the degree of certainty they have that this is, in fact, the guy?
I believe you're going to hear a complex press conference that comes through where they're going to reveal a limited amount of details because they still have a major lot of work ahead of them, because we've moved from the dynamic uncertainty of the physical world into a very complex collection of data.
Apologies for the interruption, Brian. We just want to address the technical issue we have with your audio, and we'll get you back as soon as we can. We want to reconnect now with Doug Coons. He's a former special agent for the FBI and founder and CEO of Veracity IIR. Doug, I believe what Brian was saying there through the audio was that investigators will still want to be careful about details they release for many reasons, while also having an incentive to calm the public and, of course, please the administration in showing that progress is being made. How difficult of a balance is that in general?
It's very difficult in this day and age. And when you have a high-profile person like Charlie Kirk, the public wants to know, and there's a lot of pressure on law enforcement and prosecutors to release this information. They want to know, now they want to know why, and we really haven't established for sure that it's him. You know, it seems pretty good, but we tend to try these things in the media before they even reach court. So you have to be careful. They don't want to release too much, and the investigation's really still just beginning. They've got someone in custody, a strong suspect. They've got to look at internet history. They've got to look at, and they've got to do a data extraction from a cell phone. Who was he in contact? Was there anybody else involved? There's so much still to do, and I think Brian hit the nail on the head there that this is just beginning to unfold.
Are there any comparisons you can make to cases you've covered in your career? And where does the direction of how much information to release when come from? Is it top down? Is it bottom up? Does it change?
It's top down. You know, when I was an active agent, street agent, you just don't talk to them. You're not allowed to. You get in extreme hot water at the street level. So that usually comes from the SAC of the field office, the special agent in charge, or it may be delegated to the ASAC or to the media representative. Every field office has at least one media representative. On something like this, you know, it may even be coming down from someone higher at headquarters, the U.S. Attorney's Office. Something with this amount of attention is just handled much more cautiously than a routine case.
Yeah, and we've already seen this press conference be announced for 9 a.m. Eastern and get pushed back to approximately 9:30. Carter Revens is in the room and suggests that it could possibly be pushed back further precisely due to the reasons that you've just laid out. Doug, thank you for that. Stay close if you can. CBS News reporter Andres Gutierrez is in Orem, Utah, joins us once again. Daylight breaking there where you are, Andres. Are you getting a sense of reaction from people there as they wake up to this news?
Still no reaction yet out here. There is a small visual that's been placed right by the entrance of the university here. But, Errol, it is important to note that at yesterday's news conference, the first one that they held for the day, they said that they were not going to be releasing any images of the suspect because they were confident that they had the technologies to identify him. Then by later that morning, they ended up actually releasing the first batch of images of the suspect. And it's important to note how the tips kind of gradually grew. At first, they said they had received 130 tips. Then by late morning, 200 tips. And then by last night's news conference, they said they had received over 7,000 tips, talked to 200 people. The way they're able to accomplish that is because of all the collaboration that law enforcement are currently taking part in. There is federal, state, and local law enforcement that have been based out of that building right there, the Fugel Center here on the campus of Utah Valley University. They have essentially created the nerve center of this investigation in there. They have at one point, we actually had almost unfettered access to the building. We could walk through in there and you had rooms that were literally labeled as witness rooms. They eventually figured out that they should close that off to the media and they roped it off by mid-morning. More teams from the FBI ended up showing up, and then eventually we learned that the U.S. Marshal Service ended up getting involved. Now, it is going to be interesting to know the details as to where exactly this individual got arrested, because the campus is right off of Interstate 15, which goes north to Salt Lake City, but as far south as to Los Angeles. I mean, you hit major cities like Las Vegas. So we'll see which route he ended up taking, how far did he get, and how did he get to wherever wherever they ended up apprehending him. What mode of transportation did he use? We know that over with the United Healthcare CEO, it was a Greyhound bus that took Luigi Mangione out to Pennsylvania, where essentially it was a wanted poster. Someone at a McDonald's restaurant there spotted him. And in this case, supposedly, according to the president, it was a minister who had ties to law enforcement who essentially encouraged the family of this suspect to come forth. So again, hopefully we'll get some more details here during this news conference. But during the first one yesterday, again, they said they were going to rely on the technology, which they very much did, right? At this point, we have so much AI technology out there, license plate readers. They have been probably tapping into those databases. They talked about the weapon. That was like the big breakthrough that the big top line headline from that news conference about this Mauser high bolt rifle. It's a hunting rifle, usually typically used for deer hunting. It fires off a single shot at a time, but it's pretty accurate. And so we're going to see, we're going to see if he chose this particular rifle because it's one that may not be easily traced. The other questions we're going to hopefully learn in the coming answers in the coming hours and days is, was there anyone who aided and abetted this individual in carrying out this assassination? So hopefully now that they have someone apparently in custody, they can execute a search warrant at this individual's location and hopefully get some more of that information, Errol.
Yeah, it's remarkable detail you're providing, Andres, as you are outside of where this press conference will take place. As you mentioned, you're effectively in the nerve center of not just where this happened, but where investigators were speaking with witnesses and gathering evidence. From your perspective, as we stand by for this press update, potentially in the next 10 minutes or so, how have you seen the sense of urgency behind this investigation? Because the shooting itself, the footage, the status of the man assassinated, his connection to the White House really seemed to capture the nation immediately. How, where you are in the center of it all, was that evident?
Well, the fact that the FBI director himself has made it on the ground here with the deputy director, that's huge. You don't typically see that in a lot of investigations. You did not see that in the United Healthcare CEO murder. You definitely saw it here. Obviously, perhaps the close nature of the relation that Charlie Kirk had with the president and this particular administration, but you could imagine that they have dedicated every imaginable resource to this particular investigation because of a high-profile nature of it. But yes, it has been a hubbub of activity in that building. You've seen law enforcement go out in teams to canvass the nearby neighborhood of where the suspect was seen fleeing to. TMZ releasing that video last night of the suspect in the minutes, about 8 minutes prior to the shooting, ended up walking towards the campus there. He was seen in that video limping, possibly with the weapon in his pants, and then ends up carrying out the assassination, leaps off that building. That's the video that police released during that news conference last night. And it's pretty calculated. It seems like this guy had scoped out this particular building because he knew how exactly to leave off of it. And when he left off of it, there didn't seem any injury because the TMZ video then shows him running towards a construction site without any problems. But then the question is where does he go from there? Right? Did he get in a vehicle and take off on Interstate 15? Did he take some other mode of transportation? Those are all questions we're waiting to see.
Yeah, and to your point, there certainly appears at this early stage to have been a high level of premeditation and planning. Andres Gutierrez is there in Orem, Utah, as we stand by for an update from the FBI any moment now. Thank you for that, Andres. Brian Botig joins us once again on the phone. He's a former assistant director at the FBI. And Brian, I'm curious, what are the top questions on your mind as we approach this press conference and digest the news from President Trump that a suspect in the assassination of Charlie Kirk is in custody?
I think on my mind, and probably the FBI's mind at this time, is the fact that we've moved from this dynamic uncertainty in the physical world. We have somebody in custody, but now we evolve into a very complex collection of data, evidence, and most importantly, an exploration of his network. Who was he in touch with, both in the physical world and online? And are there other people who were responsible or co-conspirators in this, or did he act alone?
And the fact that, based on what we just heard from Andres, based on the early evidence and clues and pictures and images, that this appears to be highly calculated, planned out, strategic, all the way down to the glasses and the hat, wearing all black, appearing to walk with a limp, and then having a seeming path of exit. How does that add or change the dynamic of what the case investigators will be trying to make?
It's going to be very thorough, and a lot of this is going to happen in the digital world. The looking at connectivity between telephone calls, chat channels, text messages, really exploring any type of cloud accounts, but really that social media footprint. Where was he active? Who was he active with? And those private messages that occur among different groups, just to ensure that there are not other people who contributed to this, either knowingly or unknowingly, but it's going to be a wide net that is cast here to find out who his network is and what responsibility others may have for this, or whether he simply acted alone. But this is going to be done through geofencing. It's going to be looking at cellular data of all of his locations, not just where he went after this event. The details of his escape are going to be interesting, but the details of his life over the last 4 or 5 years are going to be really telling in this investigation.
And Brian, there's one more point that strikes me as we speak about this, which is that how rare this is to have a suspect in an assassination of someone alive, well, and in custody. I'm thinking back to a case unfolding right now in Florida. One man suspected of an attempted assassination attempt against President Trump is defending himself, and his opening statement was cut off because the judge found that he was wasting the court's time. I'm thinking of Butler, Colorado, where that suspect in that assassination attempt was neutralized by police, so we don't know what his motivations may have been. Is there a case in your experience where we've been able to speak and interview someone who is accused of an assassination? And if not, how unique will this case be?
Well, I think one of the beauties of the FBI is, and some of the historic leaders that were in the FBI, is the knowledge that we had. And my time in law enforcement dates back to the Oklahoma City bombing. You've got Timothy McVeigh, who ended up talking to reporters from the Buffalo News. But then you also have Eric Rudolph from the Olympic Park bombing back in 1996. Dynamic changes in their capture. It took 7 years to catch Eric Rudolph. Timothy McVeigh was caught in 90 minutes. So this, almost 36-hour period for this arrest doesn't seem, so extraordinary. But it will be interesting to see what he does as far as taking his Fifth Amendment right to not speak or have counsel, whether he gives a statement or not. But it will be a very dynamic day trying to figure out what the next steps are with him and with the U.S. Attorney's Office.
And as we stand by for this press update from the FBI, I just want to throw this question to you. Do these guys actually think they will get away with these things?
I think everybody is, if you're doing this, you have some type of mental illness to begin with. So understanding each one of their ideologies mixed in with their personal situation and how they feel, it's hard to make an assessment of any individual here. But I do believe that they want to be a martyr for this cause, and it's really about name recognition for themselves, maybe a little bit more so than the contributions that they're making to the cause.
It's a chilling thought in this time of heightened political violence in the United States. Brian Botig, we certainly appreciate your insight. Stay close if you can. We want to jump to CBS News correspondent Natalie Brand, who is at the White House. Natalie, we're still kind of watching the podium there in Orem, Utah, ahead of this press update. What more information are you learning from the White House this hour?
Yeah, well, the president giving some additional information about when he found out about this horrific tragedy on Wednesday, saying that he was with architects as he was designing the ballroom that he's going to be building here at the White House, and his staff came in and announced that Charlie Kirk was dead, and he said he just didn't know what they meant. There's just a state of shock and grief that has overtaken the White House, given the closeness of the relationship between Kirk and the president and his team here, including the vice president. And you could just tell since Wednesday in the president's remarks yesterday at the 9/11 memorial, he's been shaken by this. Kirk, he described this morning on Fox News as kind of like a member of the family. Yesterday in his remarks at the 9/11 remembrance, he opened with a tribute to Kirk, also announced that he would be awarding him the Presidential Medal of Freedom, the highest civilian honor. He said, "I have no doubt that Charlie's voice and the courage he put into the hearts of countless people, especially young people, will live on." The president this morning also confirming that he will attend Kirk's funeral. We don't have the details about that, but we expect it to be held in Arizona, where Kirk lived and his political group, Turning Point USA, was headquartered. And he said that, that Kirk shouldn't be having a funeral right now, and going on to discuss his impact in turning out the youth vote, the conservative vote last year on the campaign trail, and also, working with him in the years prior. This White House gives him so much credit for helping to cement his second-term victory. And we know he had a particularly close relationship with the vice president, J.D. Vance, who Vance described in a very personal social media account. Vance went to Salt Lake City yesterday to retrieve Kirk's body and deliver it back to Arizona on Air Force Two. And I want to read you part of what Vance said in his statement about Kirk's political assassination. He said, "Kirk exemplified a foundational virtue of our republic, the willingness to speak openly and debate ideas." That's why so many, Errol, on both sides of the political aisle are saying, this assassination really was an attack on democracy. The president asked how he would like supporters to respond to Kirk's death. He said Charlie was an advocate of nonviolence, and that is the way he'd like people to respond. Errol.
Natalie Brand with the latest for us from the White House as we stand by for this update from the FBI on a potential suspect now being in custody in the assassination of Charlie Kirk. And I want to provide you this news update, according to our CBS News senior White House reporter Jennifer Jacobs, and that is that multiple sources are now telling CBS News there is a strong physical resemblance between the person law enforcement officials have in custody and an image of the person of interest that the FBI released in this case. That is according to our Jennifer Jacobs. CBS News senior coordinating producer of crime and public safety, Anna Schechter, is on the line with us as we continue to stand by for more information. Anna, just that detail from Jennifer that the person in custody and the images that we've all seen appear to have a strong resemblance certainly boosts the confidence that this very well could be the suspect.
That's right. But it is early days. But those images released last night gave a much clearer picture of who we are looking at in terms of the build. So when they're sitting there across from him and he is telling them, "I'm turning myself in," his father is there confirming that this is the individual who carried out this assassination, that is a whole lot of arrows pointing at this person as being that person. So that's what they're dealing with right now. They're executing search warrants, most likely. They want to go into his electronic communications. If they take his phone, they can then geolocate where he's been. They could probably even figure out if he was the person on that roof. All that information is going to go into this case that they want to build against this person.
And investigators also have to be careful as they continue this investigation against someone who if this is the person, has made themselves appear to be extremely dangerous. It may have been, we don't know yet, politically motivated. You don't want a situation where the law enforcement officials are putting themselves in danger. Can you help us understand the challenge of investigators of sharing with the public as much as they can, but not jeopardizing the investigation or any of their agents still gathering evidence? Because it's what also stands out to me is they only released about, I think, 4 images showing a close-up, a side view, his frame, instead of hundreds of images and video clips.
That's right. You raise a really good point. We're in early days, and there's a crime scene to secure. They don't want evidence to get tainted and eventually be inadmissible to this case that they're building. So all of that has to be taken into account. At the same time, you have investigators out in the field still chasing down leads. But if this is the strongest lead, they're now going to divert their resources to identifying and interviewing as many people close to this person as possible. They want to build a case for the motive. All of that is underway. It's probably already underway, and why they feel so confident at this time. Of course, it is early days, and yesterday they put out incorrect information, so we want to be cautious.
If you're just joining us, it is just past 9:30 here on the East Coast in New York City. I'm Errol Barnett at the CBS News Broadcast Center in New York. We're standing by to hear from the FBI on news that a suspect is now in custody in the assassination of Charlie Kirk. This was announced by President Trump on Fox News approximately 90 minutes ago. Let's play you a portion of what the president said.
I think with a high degree of certainty, we have him in custody, right? In custody. Everyone did a great job. We worked with the local police, the governor. Everybody did a great job. Getting somebody that you start off with absolutely nothing. And we started off with a clip that made him look like an ant that was almost useless. We just saw there was somebody up there. And so much work has been done over the last 2.5 days. It's amazing, actually, when you start off with that and then all of a sudden you get lucky or talent or whatever it is. But, I think we're in great shape. Mr. President. And he's in custody.
And the president also went on to say that a person of faith, a minister who is close to a U.S. Marshal, effectively worked with the suspect's father in convincing the suspect to turn himself in. That man now at police headquarters, and according to our recent reporting, multiple sources say the person in custody bears a very strong resemblance to the images that the FBI shared within the past 24 hours. Anna Schechter is still on the line with us as we look at the press conference, which could begin momentarily. Anna, what do you make of the storyline as we hear it so far? Again, the president couched this with, I think, and these details could change. We're waiting to hear the official word. But if someone was able to convince this suspect's father to say, hey, turn yourself in, that would suggest he did not flee very far.
Well, not too far, not out of states, but he probably could have gotten a couple of 100 miles away. We don't know exactly where he turned himself in. It is not necessarily in that immediate campus area. In fact, more likely further away. Utah is a big place, so that suspect might have been able to gain access to a vehicle and drive as much as a few 100 miles away. So that we are still working to firm up exactly where the individual turns himself in with his father, who was obviously a part of this, according to Trump's statement. I just want to sort of pause for a moment for our viewers. This is just a stunning series of events this morning that are playing out. The President of the United States goes on a network television show with information about this potential assassin that he heard about 5 minutes before. So all of this just speaks to the frantic nature of this investigation, the fast-moving parts, and the very quick-to-go public rhetoric that was used, is being used by the White House, by the FBI. It's really just an unprecedented situation that we find ourselves in. there is a lot of circumstantial evidence and the physical resemblance. So law enforcement feels very confident this is the individual, but let's see, they're executing search warrants. They still want to go through this person's phone, create a timeline of where this person was. They can probably do that if he had a cell phone that was pinging to towers. So all of that is happening. All of that investigative process continues as we're talking right now and as we are waiting for the FBI to give the public more information.
Anna, you make a great point. I mean, since Wednesday, all of us have almost been witnessing this case and have felt as if we're inside the investigation room in real time, from the moment the president announced Charlie Kirk had died to this morning as the president announces someone is in custody. And to your point, to my question about how far away did this guy really get, we have one source telling CBS News the suspect potentially taken into custody and questioned in southern Utah by U.S. Marshals. So that kind of confirms what you were suggesting, in that he likely did get away to some distance and was not necessarily in the vicinity. Again, we're waiting to hear the official word from the FBI as soon as this press availability gets underway. Anna, what then are your biggest questions that you hope the FBI answers in this press conference, because they cannot tell everything they know for fear of jeopardizing their investigation?
Well, I'm interested that they've delayed it a half an hour. It sounds like they're getting their ducks in a row, and they have likely made a decision at this point if they want to put the name out of the suspect. So I expect that we will likely get an identification, a name on this individual, and then I'm sure social media will blow up, as it has been since the moment of the assassination. You know, lots of theories swirling online. All of that has been going on and has actually factored into this investigation, frankly. And law enforcement has used the public in a way to get the word out. They needed those tips. I'm thinking also about that surveillance footage that we saw late last night, that was released late last night, where you see this individual racing across the roof with the backpack, climbing down. And what struck me was that this was very well planned. This individual knew exactly what he was planning to do. He carried out the assassination, and then he had his escape plan. He ran. He wasn't looking around, where do I go? He ran straight across that roof. He got down. He sort of was trotting like a slow run across the grass, and then started walking. He clearly wanted to appear calm. This was a very well-planned assassination. A lot of thought went into that. That's what struck me when I was watching that video late last night. And he probably had a getaway plan as well. You saw him kind of waiting for traffic, wanting to cross that street, get access to that wooded area where he dropped the gun. It did seem that a fair amount of planning went into this, and that might be why he was able to gain access to a vehicle and drive away from the immediate area of the campus.
Anna Schechter is our senior coordinating producer for crime and public safety. We're standing by to hear more from the FBI as soon as a press availability begins there in Orem, Utah. You're looking at the podium set up and ready to go. We want to share with you more of what President Trump announced this morning on Fox News when he shared the development that a suspect in the assassination of Charlie Kirk was in custody.
I don't want to go too far. I'd like to tell you some stories at how it happened, but essentially somebody that was very close to him turned him in. And that happens when you had some of those good shots. Somebody is going to say, whether it's a parent or whatever, I'd rather not say right now. They're going to announce it today, sometime later, probably talk about that. And somebody that was very close to him said, that's him. And essentially went to the father and went to a U.S. Marshal, who was fantastic, by the way, and the person was involved with law enforcement, but was a person of faith, a minister, and brought him to a U.S. Marshal, who was fantastic, and the father convinced the son, this is it. And again, I'm always subject to be corrected, but you know, I'm just giving you, based on what I'm hearing, they'll give you a much more active. I just heard about it 5 minutes before I walked in, as I'm walking in.
And that was President Trump approximately 90 minutes ago. CBS News reporter Andres Gutierrez is in Orem, Utah. And as you mentioned, Andres, you are very close to the nerve center of the investigation there in the field. As we stand by for this press update from the FBI, what more can you tell us about plans in the community to try and heal?
Well, Errol, let me give you a lay of the land out here at Utah Valley University. The Brandon Frugal Gateway Center, that building right there is the nerve center, yes, of this operation. State, local, and federal law enforcement working out of that building. Just beyond it is the crime scene. It is the courtyard where Charlie Kirk was speaking Wednesday at noon when this all unfolded. There is a vigil, a little makeshift memorial set up outside here, and you could see on that sign there, it says, "Thank you for being our voice when we were silenced." Turning Point USA has 800 chapters across the country, this being one of them. This was the first out of 14 stops that Charlie Kirk was planning to do for his American comeback tour. He had arrived here, was throwing out hats. 3,000 people were in attendance. There were just 6 campus police officers in and around the perimeter. According to officers, the suspect showed up here 8 minutes prior to the event. TMZ video that was released circulating last night shows the individual walking here to the campus, essentially with a limp, presumably with that long rifle that was used. Eventually, according to authorities, he ends up taking a sniper's position at the Losi Center, which is about 200 yards away from where Kirk was speaking. This particular rifle being described as an imported Mauser bolt-action rifle. It's a rifle that's usually used for hunting deer. It only fires a single shot at a time. And it is one that is it's really hard to trace. It's not one of those ones that you would have like an AR with better scopes. And so ends up taking that shot, and then, as Anna pointed out in that video that police released yesterday, he is methodical about the way he leaves. He does a little bit of a parkour, essentially. You know, he takes off across the roof, he leaps off of it, but had almost calculated to the fact where he doesn't get injured, because then a surveillance video, again, captured by TMZ, shows him running across a construction site. According to authorities, the weapon itself was found wrapped in a towel in that wooded area nearby the campus. Question now will become, where did he take off from there? How far did he get away from here? This campus is located right next to Interstate 15 that can go as far south, major cities, Las Vegas, Los Angeles, San Diego. Was he perhaps trying to flee across the border? We don't know. Hopefully we'll know those answers here in the coming days and weeks as we try to understand what the motive was behind this. Yesterday, when they held their first news conference, they said that they talked about the weapon, they talked about the footprints and that they received because he was wearing these Converse sneakers. They were very intentional about pointing that out, how it created some impressions that were very distinctive. They also pointed out the backpack as well as the other clothing that he was wearing. And initially, they were not going to release any images. They felt confident that they were able to tap into the various databases that they were going to have, that they were not going to release images. But then by late morning, we had our first images of the suspect. And then in the afternoon, released another batch of images. And then by evening, we had video. And eventually, it was the public, right? It always is, right? You want to rely on the public's help to turn, and apparently it was a minister who saw the images, recognized the guy, who then compelled the parents to hopefully give this kid a call and say, hey, you got to turn yourself in.
Just remarkable sequence of events, Andres, and you're doing a fantastic job of taking us to the scene and walking us through the information as it was made available. Stand by for us, because I know we're going to listen to this FBI press conference when it gets underway, but I want to bring in Brian Botig. He's on the phone and a former assistant director of the FBI, and can give us a sense of what happens next here, Brian. The FBI, of course, being careful of what they can and cannot say. This was initially scheduled for 46 minutes ago, and they've pushed it back until they're well and ready. What happens next, typically?
Well, in the pursuit of this individual, there's a lot that can be done legally without warrants because of the sense of urgency and the requirements for public safety. But now that you have somebody in custody, this has to slow down a little bit. We still want a fast investigation. We want to develop leads. We want to figure out who he's been talking to, what connections he has, really going through that social media and all of his emails and communications. But that now has to be done with legal process. So to ensure a conviction later in court, if he's guilty of this, it has to be done with the right, correct legal process. Sometimes I think that investigators really want to grab that information, but we have to now sit back and think about the prosecution and how is the information that we're going to gather now going to be legally able to be presented in court. But you still have that unknown if other people are involved in this, if there's a network of other people who might be charged. So there is a bit of a dynamic nature to this. You had mentioned earlier about going to conduct some of these searches. A lot of these cases we've seen before of shooters have left places behind. Their vehicles or their homes have been booby-trapped. So even when we're going to be conducting searches later today of his residences or places where he's been, that is, as quickly as we want to get that done, that has to be done slowly to ensure public safety and the safety of the people that are conducting those searches.
Well, Brian, that was precisely my thought as I wondered why investigators might want to be careful about what they say and what specifics they provide. They only released, I think these were maybe 4 images showing the suspect at different angles, different perspectives, just enough for people to be able to identify them if they know someone similar. But it's remarkable to me, you mentioned how the speed and tempo of the investigation must change now if this is in fact the suspect who, according to our reporting, matches the images that have been released. What specifically, though, changes from the moment after the shooting when thousands of people are fearing for their lives, wondering if this person is still at large, and now this morning that a man is in custody? What's different?
Well, prior to that, you could go to telecommunications carriers and give them emergency orders without a warrant to gather this information because of the threatening nature of potential further threats and damage that may occur. But now that you have somebody in custody, that urgency no longer exists, and you have to ensure that you put the proper subpoenas and search warrants in place to gather that same information. Now, this will change if, during the course of this investigation, we find out that there are other people that are involved in this, and we need to then hunt them down. The sense of urgency then almost ramps back up to the point where you can do things under different legal authorities than you can when somebody is in custody.
Brian Botig, we appreciate your insight on this breaking news. President Trump saying a suspect is in custody in the shooting death of Charlie Kirk. We're looking at the podium in Utah, where the FBI is expected to give an update at any moment. Let's bring in CBS News Executive Director of White House and Politics, Fin Gomez, because, Fin, the big picture here is that political violence in America is raging, and lawmakers on both sides of the aisle are feeling threatened and, in fact, changing their own plans because of what happened this week. Tell us more about that.
That's right, Errol. I did speak to a congressional lawmaker earlier who said basically that the murder of Charlie Kirk was essentially a tinder box moment, and that they fear that this will fuel more political violence. It's already been a very divided and polarized political climate before the brutal killing of Charlie Kirk. So now that there are fears from both sides of the aisle that it will get worse. There has been a collective expression of concern from lawmakers about their safety following the murder and just what lies ahead. As you know, Errol, we've talked about this before, but this impact is not just on Capitol Hill or in Washington, but on the campaign trail as well. Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, the Democratic congresswoman from New York. She canceled 2 political rallies this weekend because of this, and also there was another rally. There's some Nancy Mace, the Republican lawmaker from South Carolina. She's running for governor in the state. She said that she's postponing and not having any public events for her campaign bid either, and she's also going to be carrying a firearm. But I did want to add this, Errol. I did speak to a senior Republican official following the news that the suspect may be detained here. Basically, they told me that collectively that a lot of people don't fully understand just how livid the Republican base is right now, how angry they are after this, and how really upset they are also over the reaction by some on the fringes of the left towards Charlie Kirk and how they've criticized him and his political stances. Some of them are controversial to a lot of people in the United States, but also saying that there was this automatic reaction to point the fingers, to criticize, and to even celebrate, and they feel that in itself will also fuel potentially a reaction and could fuel unfortunately more political violence down the line, Errol.
And one interesting point, Finn, from President Trump as he spoke on Fox and Friends this morning was one of the co-hosts asked him about the ideology of the suspect. And President Trump didn't go there. He didn't answer that question. He said he would wait to find out more. And in fact, we are waiting to hear from the FBI on the few details that they will be willing to provide. But how frustrating or frightening is it for lawmakers who are feeling this heightened climate of violence in not really knowing what the motivation was behind what appeared to be the assassination of Charlie Kirk?
Right. I mean, there's still a lot of questions surrounding that, even from some of the Republican officials that I spoke to. I did want to go back to your point real quick, Errol, about what you said the president referred to in his interview on Fox and Friends this morning. He was asked about if there would be some sort of like revenge or retribution on this. And he essentially said, yes, revenge at the polls. And that's one thing this Republican official, the senior Republican official told me, is that he believes that the events that have taken place this week could really galvanize their base. Look, we have some off-year elections coming up in just a little bit in November, and also, of course, the big one, of course, is the midterms, and they feel that in a lot of ways that this will motivate their base and others who may not have voted in these upcoming elections to go out to the polls, to do more, to galvanize, to organize, and to push their political agenda. And there's a silver lining politically, they say, to all these events and the reaction to them. Errol.
And there's notable comparisons, Finn, if we think back to the attempted assassination attempt of Donald Trump when he was on the campaign trail as candidate. It was, I think, a few weeks later when, at the time, President Biden announced he would not be running for re-election. Vice President Kamala Harris now saying that gave her a very short runway to try and take over the mantle for Democrats. And she was unsuccessful in part because Republicans were so galvanized behind their candidate of choice, President Trump. So there is some recent examples of Republicans coming together after horrific incidents like this.
That's absolutely right, and yeah, I mean, I was there on the floor of the Republican National Convention when he gave that 26-minute speech, or the first part of that long speech he gave, the first 26 minutes, where he described in detail that the terrifying events that occurred in Butler with that assassination attempt, and you did see this rallying by Republicans around the president at that time, and again, based on my conversations with a senior Republican official, they feel that there could be something similar here too with the impact of Charlie Kirk's death. He also, the official also said that what Charlie Kirk had, like the type of mantle and space that he owned within the Republican Party and within the conservative movement, was one that was not just something that you saw on social media or online, but as we saw even the other day in Utah, he had what he would do is he would go to these college campuses. He would engage with these young voters. He would engage with people who oppose his opinions and politically, and he would offer this discourse. But the fact that he was also someone who he traveled a lot. He met with a lot of different factions of the Republican Party, a lot of the members of the coalition, the Trump coalition in 2024, from young voters to evangelicals and to just a whole wide swath of them. He knew them. He connected with them. He would help organize with younger activists, and he, in many sense, his organization TPUSA rivaled the RNC in a lot of different political operations, if you recall, Errol. So
well, Finn, I just want to jump in with new information that CBS News is receiving, and we have confirmed, and that is that the suspect has just a few moments ago been named as 22-year-old Tyler Robinson, residing in southern Utah, and apparently confessed to his father. That news just being confirmed by CBS News. We're standing by for a press update from the FBI in moments. You're watching our ongoing special coverage after President Trump announced a short time ago that a suspect was in custody. President Trump saying that a pastor working with a U.S. Marshal convinced the suspect's father to have him turn himself in. He has now been identified as 22-year-old Tyler Robinson. We will expect a special report to begin momentarily as the FBI shares what they know from Orem, Utah there, the incident of the apparent assassination attempt against conservative activist Charlie Kirk. It's a sobering day for so many and a frightening one, as Finn just laid out, with what appears to be an increase in political violence across the United States. This conservative activist holding an outdoor rally where he effectively encouraged young people to convince him that he's wrong, to convince him to change his views. And during that outdoor event, Charlie Kirk, shot in the neck, rushed to a hospital, dying a short time later. President Trump this morning saying that he hopes the suspect, now identified as Tyler Robinson, according to our sources, he hopes, President Trump says, he gets the death penalty. President Trump also saying this morning he plans to attend the funeral of Charlie Kirk, whose body was flown to his home state of Arizona on Air Force Two, thanks to Vice President J.D. Vance, who was a close friend to Kirk and his family. So that information just coming in to CBS News moments before the FBI provides an update on what they can share with us. And we're just a day away from when, less than a day away from when the FBI shared images and video of this suspect before and after the event there at Utah Valley University, where Charlie Kirk was killed. Finn, what do you make of the new information as we stand by for a special report and this update from the FBI?
No, I go back to like the beginning of all this, when in the aftermath of the news of that horrific killing that many people saw online or on air. But, there was a lot of confusion. Even in that first press conference, there was a lot of confusion about if they had a person of interest, if they didn't have a person of interest. And I think when I was speaking to some Republican officials here, party officials here in D.C., there was a bit of frustration. And you saw that frustration even within the MAGA base online, going after the FBI director for initially putting out that they had captured the suspect and then having to walk that back. But going from that sort of point of confusion to this point, I think it does offer some solace to those supporters of Charlie Kirk, those and those other officials who wanted to see some sort of solution here.
Finn, gentle interruption. The special report begins momentarily.
This is a CBS News special report. I'm Gail King here in New York. Officials in Utah are about to hold a news conference on the Charlie Kirk assassination. This morning, President Trump said that he is very certain that the suspect in Wednesday's killing is under arrest. He also said that someone close to the suspect turned him in. As soon as they have that news conference, we will take it immediately live. But for now, let's go right to Carter Evans, who is in Utah. Carter, what can you tell us? What have you heard?
Well, Gail, we are expecting this news conference to start any minute now. I'm watching off camera here to see when authorities start walking in. But here is what we know. CBS News has confirmed through multiple law enforcement sources that the name of the suspect is Tyler Robinson. He is 22 years old, so college age, just like authorities had said when they found that picture and first released that picture yesterday. We did get some clearer pictures yesterday that they had enhanced of this individual, and we're told that he confessed to his father. He lives in southern Utah, and that's where he confessed to his father and was apparently turned in to U.S. Marshals. That is the latest. As far as details about how this all went down, what he has said to authorities about what occurred, has he confessed to them, we're hoping to find that out when this news conference begins in just a few minutes. We do know that they had a tremendous amount of video of this individual. They were able to get that out to the public. They had 7,000 tips come in on the tip line that they were following up on. But in the end, it appears that this individual turned himself in with his father.
All right. Thank you very much. Let's turn now to senior White House correspondent Weijia Jiang and Anna Schechter, who is CBS News senior coordinating producer for crime and public safety. Good morning, guys. You know, yesterday when they released a lot of information. We saw his picture, we saw his escape. And when I went to bed last night, I said, now it's only a matter of time, surely. When I woke up this morning, I said, now we're certainly going to have something. So I was surprised that it was taking so long since the picture was so clear. And I kept thinking, family members, somebody knows this guy. Somebody speak up, Weijia.
Well, you know, last night, Gail, we had a press conference from local authorities in Utah. The FBI director, Kash Patel, was standing with them. They released new images, but they did not say anything about coming close to having a suspect in custody. And it wasn't until this morning that President Trump, not law enforcement officials, but the president, broke the news that, as you mentioned, he said there was a high degree of certainty that the suspect was in custody. Multiple sources tell CBS News that the person they have has a strong resemblance to all those images that we have been seeing. And the president actually went on to reveal some of those details that we just heard from Carter. He said that it was a minister who was familiar with this person, who recognized him, and then this minister informed the U.S. Marshal's office, and somehow after that, the family became involved, and the father convinced his son, the shooter, to turn himself in. That's according to President Trump. But obviously, Gail, there are still so many questions. Yeah, yes. Because we haven't heard from police.
I would imagine everybody's Googling Tyler, because his name has been released. Everyone's Googling the name to find out what we can find out about this person.
That's right.
We see they're entering the room now. Anna, stand by for just a sec.
At today's press conference, we will hear from Governor Cox, FBI Director Kash Patel, and Sheriff Mike Smith. We also have with us Utah DPS Commissioner Bo Mason, Lieutenant Governor Deidre Henderson, FBI Special Agent in Charge Robert Bowles, and local and federal law enforcement partners. Following the remarks today, Governor Cox, Director Patel, and Commissioner Mason will take questions. Thank you.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. We got him. On the evening of September 11th, a family member of Tyler Robinson reached out to a family friend who contacted the Washington County Sheriff's Office with information that Robinson had confessed to them or implied that he had committed the incident. This information was relayed to the Utah County Sheriff's Office and scene investigators at Utah Valley University. This information was also conveyed to the FBI. Investigators reviewed additional video footage from UVU surveillance and identified Robinson arriving on UVU campus in a gray Dodge Challenger at approximately 8:29 a.m. on September 10th, in which he is observed on video in a plain maroon t-shirt, light-colored shorts, a black hat with a white logo, and light-colored shoes. When encountered in person by investigators in Washington County on September 12th, in the early morning hours, Robinson was observed in consistent clothing with those surveillance images. Investigators interviewed a family member of Robinson who stated that Robinson had become more political in recent years. The family member referenced a recent incident in which Robinson came to dinner prior to September 10th, and in the conversation with another family member, Robinson mentioned Charlie Kirk was coming to UVU. They talked about why they didn't like him and the viewpoints that he had. The family member also stated Kirk was full of hate and spreading hate. The family member also confirmed Robinson had a gray Dodge Challenger. Investigators identified an individual as the roommate of Robinson. Investigators interviewed that roommate, who stated that his roommate, referring to Robinson, made a joke on Discord. Investigators asked if he would show them the messages on Discord. He opened it and showed several messages to investigators and allowed investigators to take photos of the screen as each message was shown by Robinson's roommate. These photos consisted of various messages, including content of messages between the phone contact named Tyler with an emoji icon and Robinson's roommate's device. The content of these messages included messages affiliated with the contact Tyler, stating a need to retrieve a rifle from a drop point, leaving the rifle in a bush, messages related to visually watching the area where a rifle was left, and a message referring to having left the rifle wrapped in a towel. The messages also refer to engraving bullets and a mention of a scope and the rifle being unique. Messages from the contact Tyler also mentioned that he had changed outfits. I know there has been speculation as well as to the writing on those casings, those bullet casings, and I believe we have that as well. And I will share that with you now. So the area north of Campus Drive Road where the suspect crossed over, you saw some of that in the video that we released last night, consists of a grassy area with trees on the edge of the UVU campus. Investigators discovered a bolt-action rifle wrapped in a dark-colored towel. The rifle was determined to be a Mauser Model 98 30-06 caliber bolt-action rifle. The rifle had a scope mounted on top of it. Investigators noted inscriptions that had been engraved on casings found with the rifle. Inscriptions on a fired casing read, "Notices, bulges, capital OWO, what's this, question mark." Inscriptions on the 3 unfired casings read, "Hey fascist, exclamation point, catch, exclamation point." Up arrow symbol, right arrow, and symbol, and 3 down arrow symbols. A second unfired casing read, "Oh Bella Chow, Bella Chow, Bella Chow, Chow Chow." And a third unfired casing read, "If you read this, you are gay, LMAO." We are indebted to law enforcement across the state who has worked seamlessly together, local law enforcement, state law enforcement, and our federal partners with the Federal Bureau of Investigation. We're grateful for everyone who worked together in such a short amount of time to find this person and to bring justice. I want to thank the public who has been so engaged, reviewing videos, helping us with sending in tips, and helping us get to this point. I want to thank the family members of Tyler Robinson who did the right thing in this case and were able to bring him into to law enforcement as well. I especially want to thank the family of Charlie Kirk, Erica, Charlie's parents, his children. I want us to be thinking of them as we bring justice in this case. They will be involved in that justice. We will be working very closely with them as we move through this process as well. This is a very sad day for our country, a terrible day for the state of Utah, but I'm grateful that at this moment we have an opportunity to bring closure to this very dark chapter in our nation's history. With that, I will now turn the microphone over to the Director of the FBI, Kash Patel.
Thank you, Governor. This is what happens when you let good cops be cops. The FBI and our partners are proud to stand here today together to bring justice to the family of Charlie Kirk and honor his memory. I want to express my deep gratitude to President Trump, the Vice President, and the entire White House who have been so incredibly supportive with both resources and just personally to the FBI as a team. They had our backs the entire way, and I just want to express my gratitude for giving us the resources we need to operate in this space to bring this sort of justice at this sort of speed. In 33 hours, we have made historic progress for Charlie. Governor Cox, our partnership has been absolutely incredible these last few days. Our partnership will endure. Your state and local partners, your sheriffs, your DPS community has been unbelievably impressive in the hardest of times. And a case like this cannot be solved, cannot be brought without partnering with your state and local authorities. The FBI has a certain role to play, and we will play that role, and we will lead out for the federal government. But Governor Cox, we are so grateful for your state partnership that led out on this investigation. A little bit of the timeline. Charlie was shot at 12:23 p.m. on Wednesday. The first FBI agents arrived on scene in 16 minutes with chiefs of police at 12:39 and secured the scene. The FBI immediately launched fixed-wing assets. We utilized these assets to transport personnel, specialty technicians, hostage rescue teams. We also utilized these assets to go back and forth from the East Coast and here in Utah to transport forensic evidence and other evidence that will be analyzed and is being analyzed at our FBI laboratories in Quantico and other laboratories, including the ATF. At my direction, the FBI released the first set of FBI photos of the suspect at 10 a.m. local time on 9/11. Then, shortly thereafter, the FBI reward of $100,000 was released at 10:45 a.m. local. Myself and Deputy Director Bongino arrived on the scene at approximately 5:30 p.m. on 9/11. The governor led a press conference last night at approximately 8 p.m., where at my direction, the FBI released a never-before-seen video of the suspect. We also released new images to the public of the suspect. And just last night, the suspect was taken into custody at 10 p.m. local time. In less than 36 hours, 33 to be precise, thanks to the full weight of the federal government and leading out with the partners here in the state of Utah and Governor Cox, the suspect was apprehended in a historic time period. And I want to highlight what Governor Cox said. This would not have been possible without you, the media, and you, the public. That's why we went so public, so fast, and we're so transparent, and we're committed to that transparency. The crime scene, just a little bit there. It is a large crime scene. State and local authorities, along with federal authorities, processed that crime scene quickly. And I even had the ability to walk through that crime scene and walk through the steps the suspect took to learn more about what was needed and what resources we needed to bear to create a full picture for the FBI and leadership back in Washington. Furthermore, thankfully to state and local partners, forensic evidence has been seized and continues to be garnered. Forensic evidence has already been evaluated at FBI laboratories in Quantico and state and local authorities here. We will continue to process evidence as we see it, as we collect it, and we will continue to deliver to Governor Cox and his team. Last night, we had a total of approximately 7,000 leads. As of this morning, thanks to your great work, we have over 11,000 leads that were called in to the FBI, and we are running out every single lead that we can. Every one of those leads will be run out. The arrest is a testament to the dedication of good law enforcement being great and partnerships in law enforcement, which I've tried to highlight as my tenure as the director of the FBI. There is no better relationship for law enforcement than the FBI to partner with state and local authorities, and you've seen it here in these last few days. The FBI Salt Lake field office, along with our offices in LA, Phoenix, Denver, San Antonio, Las Vegas, Pittsburgh, Buffalo, our headquarters component in Quantico, all participate in the FBI. I want to express my deep gratitude to the employees of the FBI, the men and women, the evidence response team tacticians, the special operators, the agents, the support staff. You have done monumental work in historic time when the public, who had a right to demand such an expeditious solving of an investigation, the FBI answered that call diligently, critically important to our nation, and we delivered. And I'm proud to be their leader, and I'm proud to be the director of the FBI. This is very much an ongoing investigation, as the governor said, and we will continue to work with state and local authorities to develop the investigation, to provide them the evidence they need for their ongoing prosecutions, and we will be here to answer every call they absolutely have, as long as it takes, for as long as we need to find and apprehend whatever suspects were involved in this crime. Lastly, to my friend Charlie Kirk, rest now, brother. We have the watch, and I'll see you in Valhalla.
Thank you, and good morning. I would just like to take a few minutes as the sheriff to express my gratitude for everybody who has played a part in this investigation. As you know, it's been a vast, a complicated, and a very, very fast-paced investigation. You're looking at people standing up here who are running on, if they got an hour's sleep in the last couple of days, they're probably lucky. It has been very taxing. It has been so impressive, speaking on behalf of the local law enforcement, to see the cooperation that we've seen in this type of case. Across the state, sheriffs, chiefs, our state partners have stepped up and have come to the call on anything that we needed. Our county chiefs have been phenomenal. Our Utah County Attorney, Jeff Gray, who's standing up here with us, has been phenomenal in leading us through this investigation. I would like to thank the federal government for their resources, their assets. Our local team here, our FBI team, has been extraordinary in helping us work through this and bring this person to justice. Most of all, I would like to thank the public, and specifically, I would like to thank the public who turned to prayers and who turned to positiveness for us. I would like to thank them on behalf of the law enforcement community, because we needed those prayers. That's what we needed to get through this. We needed your support, and you gave it to us. We needed your patience, and you gave it to us. And I would like to thank you for the Kirk family, because that's what they need, is your support and your prayers, and that will get us through all of this. So thank you, everybody, for everybody that have stepped up. We've had such a phenomenal response to this. Thank you.
I also want to give a special thanks to the Attorney General and the Department of Justice. Their unwavering support and their commitment to justice is shown true here. And without AG Bondi and Deputy Attorney General Todd Blanche and the resources they brought to bear, we would not have been able to complete our mission. And I just want to say special thanks. It's an honor to be a part of the Department of Justice.
Thank you again to our incredible law enforcement team who has worked so hard. Sheriff, I got a solid 90 minutes last night, so I'm probably the most well-rested person up here. Ladies and gentlemen, I get the microphone, so I hope you'll permit me a moment just to share a few more thoughts about where we are and how we got here, and maybe a little bit of where we go from here. I don't want to get too preachy, but I think it's important that we, with eyes wide open, understand what's happening in our country today. I've heard people say, well, why are we so invested in this? There's violence happening all across our country, and violence is tragic everywhere. And every life taken is a child of God who deserves our love and respect and dignity. This is certainly about the tragic death assassination, political assassination of Charlie Kirk. But it is also much bigger than an attack on an individual. It is an attack on all of us. It is an attack on the American experiment. It is an attack on our ideals. This cuts to the very foundation of who we are, of who we have been, and who we could be in better times. Political violence is different than any other type of violence for lots of different reasons. One, because in the very act that Charlie championed of expression, that freedom of expression that is enshrined in our founding documents, in having his life taken in that very act, makes it more difficult for people to feel like they can share their ideas, that they can speak freely. We will never be able to solve all the other problems, including the violence problems that people are worried about, if we can't have a clash of ideas safely and securely. Even, especially those ideas with which you disagree. That's why this matters so much. Over the last 48 hours, I have been as angry as I have ever been, as sad as I have ever been. And it was, as anger pushed me to the brink, it was actually Charlie's words that pulled me back. I'd like to share some of those. And specifically right now, if I could, I need to talk to the young people in our state, in my state, and all across the country. As President Trump reminded me, he said, you know who really loved Charlie? The youths. And he's right. Young people loved Charlie, and young people hated Charlie. And Charlie went into those places anyway. And these are the words that have helped me. Charlie said, when people stop talking, that's when you get violence. He said, the weak can never forgive. Forgiveness is the attribute of the strong. The only way out of the labyrinth of suffering is to forgive. Welcome without judgment, love without condition, forgive without limit. He said, always forgive your enemies. Nothing annoys them so much. A few months ago, I referenced this last night, Charlie posted to social media, when things are moving very fast and people are losing their minds, it's important to stay grounded. Turn off your phone, read scripture, spend time with friends, and remember, internet fury is not real life. It's going to be okay. He again said, when you stop having a human connection with someone you disagree with, it becomes a lot easier to commit violence. He said, what we as a culture have to get back to is being able to have a reasonable agreement, where violence is not an option. Now, again, to my young friends out there, you are inheriting a country where politics feels like rage. It feels like rage is the only option. But through those words, we have a reminder that we can choose a different path. Your generation has an opportunity to build a culture that is very different than what we are suffering through right now. Not by pretending differences don't matter, but by embracing our differences and having those hard conversations. I think we need more moral clarity right now. I hear all the time that words are violence. Words are not violence. Violence is violence. And there is one person responsible for what happened here. And that person is now in custody and will be charged soon and will be held accountable. And yet, all of us have an opportunity right now to do something different. I want to thank my fellow Utahns. This bad stuff happens. For 33 hours, I was praying that if this had to happen here, that it wouldn't be one of us, that somebody drove from another state, somebody came from another country. Sadly, that prayer was not answered the way I had hoped for, just because I thought it would make it easier on us if we could just say, hey, we don't do that here. And indeed, Utah is a special place. We lead the nation in charitable giving. We lead the nation in service every year. But it did happen here. And it was one of us. But I want you to look at how Utahns reacted the last 2 nights. There was no rioting. There was no looting. There were no cars set on fire. There was no violence. There were vigils and prayers and people coming together to share the humanity. And that, ladies and gentlemen, I believe is the answer to this. We can return violence with violence. We can return hate with hate. And that's the problem with political violence, is it metastasizes, because we can always point the finger at the other side. And at some point, we have to find an off-ramp, or it's going to get much, much worse. But see, these are choices that we can make. History will dictate if this is a turning point for our country. But every single one of us gets to choose right now if this is a turning point for us. We get to make decisions. We have our agency. And I desperately call on every American, Republican, Democrat, liberal, progressive, conservative, MAGA, all of us to please, please, please follow what Charlie taught me. I'll just conclude with words I share often from a friend and author, Yuval Levin, who was asked if he was optimistic about our country. And he said, I'm not optimistic. He said, I hate optimism. Like, that sounds bad. But he said, optimism is a vice. It's this idea that good things are just going to happen. And he said, in the history of the world, good things have never just happened. He says, I'm not optimistic, but I am hopeful. And hope is the virtue that sits between the vices of optimism and pessimism. Hope is the idea that good things are going to happen because we can make them so. I still believe in our country. And I know Charlie Kirk believed in our country. I still believe that there is more good among us than evil. And I still believe that we can change the course of history. I'm hopeful because Americans can make it so. Ladies and gentlemen, we're happy to answer any questions you might have.
Governor, can you please speak to whether the suspect is speaking with authorities and his demeanor, Tyler Robinson?
I cannot speak to that. I cannot speak to that. Well, I will leave that up to you to interpret what those engravings mean. I think the clearest one that says "catch fascist," there's not. And by the way, that's like catch like a ball, catch this. That's I think that speaks for itself. There's nothing more that we can share at this time.
Governor.
About the gun, do you anticipate any more arrests?
We do not at this time have any information that would lead to any additional arrests. Yes. But
Governor.
The investigation is ongoing.
Governor.
Yes, so right now, Mr. Robinson has been booked into the Utah County Jail. You heard the president this morning report that that he was taken into custody, that his family and a friend helped to deliver him into custody of law enforcement in Washington County. For those of you that don't know where Washington County is, it is the southernmost, southwesternmost part of the state of Utah. It's about a 3.5 to 4 hour drive from here, where we are right now, and that's where he lived and where they turned him in. Thanks. I'll go here. I can't share any more than what I've already shared. Yeah. So how we obtained the gun? The gun was found here. So I don't have much more details on that. We do know that he drove. We had his car here on campus, and then we had his car going south back to the St. George. It's actually the city of Washington in Washington County. I'm sorry? We don't have any information that would lead us to believe that. Yes, in fact, it was just released. Yes. I can't answer that right now. Yeah, thank you. Over here. I absolutely believe that this is a watershed in American history. Yes. The question is, what kind of watershed? And that chapter remains to be written. Is this the end of a dark chapter in our history, or the beginning of a darker chapter in our history? Look, I mean, if you look at true political assassinations in this country of someone of this stature, this feels a lot like the late 60s, and having one so gruesomely displayed on camera in all of our hands and in all of our pockets. We are not wired as human beings biologically, historically. We have not evolved in a way that we are capable of processing those types of violent imagery. And by the way, we've seen another one with a gruesome stabbing very recently that went viral. This is not good for us. It is not good to consume. Social media is a cancer on our society right now. And I would encourage people to log off, turn off, touch grass, hug a family member, go out and do good in your community. That is happening, and it's happening organically right now. I had a friend in a small city in Utah who said, we're getting together, the Republicans and Democrats in my little town are getting together to have a discussion last night, just to find a way to find their better angels. So yes, this could be, I mean, again, you have to go back to JFK to have seen a video live of something like this happening. I wasn't born until 1975, but I know that things were really dark in the late 60s. Sorry to some of you. I know some of you were there. But this is our moment. Do we escalate, or do we find an off-ramp? And again, it's a choice. It's a choice, and every one of us gets to make that choice. Two more questions right here.
Could we clarify that the release of those enhanced images at 8 p.m., the timeline that Director Patel gave us, led to the arrest at 10 p.m.? Is there a direct connection between those two events?
I cannot comment if there is a direct connection or not, but all I can say is that that through some process, the family came to know that this had happened.
One more thing, Governor. Could you just clarify the clothing issue you mentioned earlier? Was he changing outfits?
Correct. Yes. So when he's first spotted on campus, he has different clothing on, and then he changes clothing on the roof, and then changed back into that clothing at some point, so that when he was apprehended, when he was arrested, the clothing matched the clothing he had on before the shooting here at UVU. Last question here. Yes. Yeah, so I don't have any information on the mental illness part. He was not a student here at UVU. He was living and had lived for a long time with his family in Washington County, in the southernmost part of our state. Thank you, everyone, for your great work in getting this information out. I will just say, process-wise, this may be important. I know many of you aren't familiar with the process in Utah. I think it's important that you understand that. Basically, we have 3 days for charging documents to be filed. A CI will be filed. We'll have more information then, more detailed information as those charging documents are filed in preparation for a preliminary hearing. So 3 days. So we would anticipate then that early next week those charging documents will be filed. We will obviously be working. The county attorney will be working very closely with Mr. Kirk's family as those documents and decisions are prepared and made. Thanks, everyone.
And as you've just heard, authorities have announced they do have a suspect in custody for the assassination of political activist Charlie Kirk on Wednesday. He's been identified as Tyler Robinson. He is 22 years old. He is a resident of Utah. Let's go to our justice correspondent, Scott McFarlane in Washington. Scott, there was a lot to unpack in that news conference, a lot of information just revealed to us. What stuck out to you?
Gail, a day-and-a-half manhunt that captured the world's attention ended, according to the investigators, when the defendant confessed to his father. And his father went to clergy, and they turned him in. This was a self-directed turn-in by the Robinson family, according to what the governor said there. 11,000 tips came in. All that video was released, and a couple key takeaways from what the governor said when he was answering questions about the video and about the case, that we do not have information that will lead to any more arrests. Not the most declarative statement I've ever heard, ruling out the possibility of more arrests or more people being considered culpable in this, but saying right now that this is the one person responsible for this murder. The inscriptions on the casings, and we heard about that, you'll recall, the murder of the United Healthcare CEO in New York City. These inscriptions, according to the investigators, included the phrases "catch fascist" and "Bella Ciao." Bella Ciao is a refrain, a motto of the Italian resistance against fascists during World War II. And also, Gail, it's noteworthy that the governor said, social media is a cancer. Get off social media. That had been an issue early in this investigation when the FBI director was on social media announcing people were in custody, when those people would later be released. Here is a more traditional way of releasing information to the public with all law enforcement together at a news conference.
He said that it had taken 33 hours. What do you make about the speed of the case? When you think about it, they released the video, they released the pictures, and after that, things really seemed to ramp up. I was surprised to hear that he'd actually been arrested at 10 o'clock last night. Did that surprise you?
The FBI director had alluded to the speed with which this investigation was concluded. And this has been faster than other cases, but there really is no traditional speed for these types of cases. And it's hard to characterize this was faster or slower than it should have been. The search, you'll recall, for Luigi Mangione in New York lasted 4 to 5 days. But this is a pretty strong indication that they think they've got their person and nobody else is a part of a network, or that there's still a public safety threat elsewhere in Utah or across America stemming from this man and this case.
Well, many people are breathing a sigh of relief that he is in custody. Thank you, Scott, so much. Let's turn now to senior White House correspondent Weijia Zhang and Anna Schechter, who's a CBS News senior coordinating producer for crime and public safety. Anna, you've been on the phone. You've got sources, too. What stands out to you? What are you hearing?
What jumped out at me is that they've already looked through the electronic communications between Tyler Robinson and his roommate at the time. In fact, law enforcement just told us that the roommate was told to go to that wooded area and recover the gun that was dropped there, that it was wrapped in a dark towel, all that detail. So those electronic communications, that's all part of a case that is being built right now, and we just heard that we'll see those charging documents early next week.
It was interesting, too, to hear that family members said that he had become more political recently.
That's right, more political, that he didn't like Charlie Kirk, and we see the message on those casings. I think that's very telling, and law enforcement right now is using that to point to a motive.
Weijia?
Well, Gail, during that press conference, the Vice President, J.D. Vance, did post, and he was careful to say that the investigation is ongoing, but he said this is a big breakthrough, and everyone who helped, from the law enforcement professionals to people giving tips, deserves our credit. He said in some ways the investigation is still in the early days. I point that out because he had such a close relationship to Charlie Kirk, and so did President Trump, along with so many other White House officials. So obviously, they were eager for this arrest, but for them and for President Trump and the vice president, this is extremely personal. And we heard from President Trump today, who actually broke the news to the world, that they had a suspect in custody. And he went on to say that he hopes he gets the death penalty. He says he's been in close contact with Kirk's family and that he plans to attend Kirk's funeral. So I think that is a layer that we cannot forget as we talk about this investigation, just what it means not only to our elected officials, but to their supporters and all the young people we've been interviewing who have never experienced something like this, and they're still trying to process.
Yeah, there were calls very early on for him to get the death penalty, which I think really says something about the family's decision to say, when they recognized him, to make sure that their son turned himself in.
And I think it's notable that the investigators and the governor talked about how in the days before Charlie Kirk visited Utah, that the suspect, Tyler Robinson, was mentioning at dinner, hey, Charlie Kirk is coming here. And that was very chilling to hear something so small that turned into something so grave.
Yeah, I'm really curious about the suspect and his back history. Well, let's turn now to CBS News national security contributor, that's Samantha Vinograd. She's in Washington. Samantha, the question for you, what would they be investigating now going forward? They seem to have a lot of information.
They sure do, Gail, and the FBI will be working through all of those leads with their state and local partners. But when we talk about the fact that the investigation is ongoing, what that means is that law enforcement professionals will be combing through this individual's history, including his social media, his communications with friends and family, and his movements. The immediate priority is to ensure that there is no ongoing threat to the public. That could entail reviewing whether this individual was in touch with like-minded individuals on Discord, on other social media channels. Was he seeking to inspire any other similar kinds of plots? So we're trying to ensure that there's no ongoing threat to the public. At the same time, investigators will want to understand the arc of radicalization and mobilization that led this individual to commit this heinous assassination. Part of that process is to try to understand if there were steps along the way that could have tipped off law enforcement, that could have prevented this horrible event, so that going forward, individuals will be more aware of what signs to look out for and how to prevent this going forward, Gil.
All right, Sam, thank you. Stand by for just a sec. Scott McFarland, let's go back to you because Sam made a very interesting point about an ongoing investigation. Do you have any more thoughts on that?
Yeah, law enforcement sources say there's a good probability, if not a likelihood, there will be both local and federal charges brought against Tyler Robinson. A bit of redundancy there in the legal system. The federal charges would begin with a criminal information, then likely a detention hearing or a preliminary hearing. You can bet the farm the government will seek detention in this case, considering the scope and size of the charges. But it's worth emphasizing that federal criminal proceedings are measured in months and years, not days and weeks. Federal criminal cases span years, and we heard the president already pre-butting that timeline, saying he likes to see faster trials, and that's going to cause some controversy in itself, that type of argument ahead of a criminal proceeding.
All right. Thank you very much, Scott. Now let's bring in Carter Evans, who was at the news conference. Carter, what questions are you hearing that are still left out there in Utah? I know so many people are so relieved that they have somebody in custody.
Right, and that's the primary thing here. But now as we look into how this all unfolded, the main question I have right now is the involvement of other people and when they knew, specifically this Discord conversation with a friend. Did that friend inform law enforcement that this had happened, or did they interview this friend after he turned himself in? That's a big question I have right now. And I asked the governor if they expected any other arrests or if he acted alone. He said they believe he acted alone, but it is still under investigation, and that could change. So that is pretty interesting there. I also have another question, too. He mentioned that they have received to date 11,000 tips. That is just astronomical. A lot of information has come in. And I'm wondering, were they able to identify this individual, this suspect, before he turned himself in? Were they on his trail already? That is not clear at this point, if it was some of those tips that panned out or if it was simply his father bringing him into the U.S. Marshal's office. So we've still got a lot to clear up here, and we're going to learn a lot more next week. He said they've got 3 days to prepare the charging documents. So basically, that's going to put them into next week, where we hear a preliminary hearing. When we get those charging documents, we're going to be able to see a lot more about what they knew when they made this arrest.
I know, Carter, thank you. I was struck, too, by Governor Cox, his words to the young people to say we all have a choice now to make a different choice. We now have the option. Politics feels like rage. It doesn't have to be this way. Carter, we thank you. Scott, Anna, Weija, Sam, we thank all of you for joining us. Just to recap for you, if you're just tuning in, authorities have confirmed the arrest of a suspect in the assassination of political activist Charlie Kirk. The suspect has been named. He is 22 years old. His name is Tyler Robinson. He is a resident of Utah. He was not a student at the school, they tell us. Robinson's family and a friend were involved in persuading him to surrender. Our coverage will continue, of course, throughout the morning on our streaming channel, CBS News 24/7. There, of course, will also be more on your local news station. And tonight on the CBS Evening News, many of you will now return to CBS Mornings. This has been a special CBS Special Report. I'm Gayle King here in New York.
Here we go. Our special breaking news coverage continues right now here on CBS News 24/7. I'm Errol Barnett in New York. Moments ago, the FBI announced the gunman accused of assassinating activist Charlie Kirk is now in custody, and he's been identified as 22-year-old Tyler Robinson, who was turned in part thanks to cooperation from his family. This morning's press update began a short time ago with remarks from Utah's Governor Spencer Cox.
We got him. On the evening of September 11th, a family member of Tyler Robinson reached out to a family friend who contacted the Washington County Sheriff's Office with information that Robinson had confessed to them or implied that he had committed the incident. This information was relayed to the Utah County Sheriff's Office and scene investigators at Utah Valley University. This information was also conveyed to the FBI. Investigators reviewed additional video footage from UVU surveillance and identified Robinson arriving on UVU campus in a gray Dodge Challenger at approximately 8:29 a.m. on September 10th, in which he is observed on video in a plain maroon T-shirt, light-colored shorts, a black hat with a white logo, and light-colored shoes.
Now, we want to use our special VR technology to help spell out for you what investigators then explained happened next after Tyler Robinson arrived on campus in that clothing. Investigators believe that below me, where you see the distance, about 400 feet between where Tyler Robinson was believed to be on the rooftop and where Charlie Kirk was holding his event, convincing students to prove him wrong. Investigators said a few moments ago that it was up here on the rooftop of this building where Tyler Robinson then changed out of that plain maroon shirt and light-colored shorts into the black clothing that he was witnessed wearing. After firing the shot, he then crossed across the rooftop, which you see in this footage, with a bag, jumped down to the grassy area near the parking lot, and then proceeded to cross a road nearby and head into a wooded area. All of this suggesting prior thought, strategy, and planning before the assassination of Charlie Kirk. Investigators also say that People close to him, his friends and his family, had said that he had become more radicalized and political lately, and talked to them about Charlie Kirk coming to campus, and that in his opinion, in the opinions of this suspect, Charlie Kirk was full of hate. So that footage was recorded just to my left. CBS News Justice correspondent Scott MacFarlane joins us from Washington with more on how we're now getting a fuller picture, Scott, of the intent of this individual, how he was able to pull this off. But investigators also said they do not believe there are any other suspects or people of interest at this time. What jumped out to you?
Yeah, the governor described this as somebody who had become radicalized or politicized in recent weeks or recent months, and that the family was noticing that, but that it also was the family that got the confession from Tyler Robinson, brought it to clergy, brought it to law enforcement, and ultimately resulted in Tyler Robinson being arrested and jailed in Washington County, Utah. Washington County, Utah, roughly 3 or 4 hours away from Utah Valley University. Tyler Robinson now is being held as a local inmate, but federal charges are imminent. If not today, I'd expect charging documents, criminal information filed over the weekend, Monday morning at the latest. And there'll be a procedure for Tyler Robinson to make a preliminary appearance in court, potentially in both local court and federal court. 2 different cases are brought. And what the governor described is just this series of granular pieces of evidence that would likely be presented to a judge at a detention hearing. The inscriptions, the engravings on the bullet casings, including the words "catch fascist" and "Bella Ciao," a message famous in Italy during World War II, during their fight against the Nazis. The 11,000 tips brought in by the feds may include something specific for prosecutors to use, but they have this information about the firearm because they have the firearm, this unique rifle with a scope on top, the bullet casings being distinguishing. And Errol, I think it's worth a conversation that these bullet casing engravings, these inscriptions, they are becoming a potential source of copycats. We've seen them in other cases in recent months, and there's fears we see them again in future shootings.
Well, the governor and other officials from the FBI spoke about a heightened sense of fear in the United States because of what seemed to be ongoing acts of political violence against people on the right and the left. How important will it be in the investigation into this that investigators are careful of what to release and also to tamp down the pressure of political rhetoric in the U.S. in the days ahead?
The governor spent a lot of his time, even before taking questions at the news conference this hour, trying to do just that with an extended message of we have a pivotal moment now, a potential off-ramp, or we continue down this road of increased political toxicity, increased political violence, and increased death. He used the phrase, social media is a cancer. He emphasized those words, that social media is spinning up so much of this hatred and that there may be foreign players involved ginning up Americans through social media channels, which is a bit of a contradiction, though, in this case, because federal law enforcement, the FBI director himself, was using social media as the singular platform to provide updates on this case prior to last night. So there's a contradiction there in what social media should be doing with cases like this. But the FBI director, you heard from him today at the news conference, he credited law enforcement with being expedient in this case, moving, in his words, I think, record time, he said. A 33-hour manhunt is not shorter or longer than any other previous manhunts, but it did result in an arrest in a case that captured the attention of the world.
An important time, especially when you consider how much misinformation was available online as it relates to this horrific incident. To be diligent, be extremely diligent with what you consume and share. Scott MacFarlane in our D.C. Bureau, thank you very much. We want to share with you the first person to break this news, President Trump, this morning at approximately 8 a.m. Eastern as he was appearing on Fox and Friends.
With a high degree of certainty, we have him. In custody, right? In custody. Everyone did a great job. We worked with the local police, the governor. Everybody did a great job.
CBS News correspondent Natalie Brand is at the White House. Natalie, as we've been speaking this morning, you've noted that the president gave as much detail as he could while appearing on that program, and was also the first person to release information that Charlie Kirk had, in fact, died. What stood out to you from the president's remarks and actions this morning?
Yeah, Errol, it speaks to the investment, the personal investment the president had in this case, the closeness, the friendship he had with Charlie Kirk. He's been shaken all week. We've heard that and seen that visibly since this political assassination, and the president pledging to commit federal resources to finding whoever was responsible. This is an assassination, a crime, horrific incident that has shaken this White House and the nation, given the closeness of this relationship. The president this morning on Fox describing Kirk like almost a member of his family. He had a direct line to President Trump as a close advisor, friend, and ally. That's something that started on the campaign trail. Kirk gets a lot of credit for really mobilizing young conservative voters and helping to cement President Trump's second-term win. He also had an extremely close relationship with the vice president, J.D. Vance, so much so that J.D. Vance canceled plans yesterday to appear at a remembrance for 9/11 at Ground Zero and instead fly to Salt Lake City and retrieve Kirk's body. In light of this breaking development today, he posted on social media, "This is a big breakthrough, and everyone who helped, from the law enforcement professionals to the people giving tips, deserves our credit and gratitude. In some ways, the investigation is still in the early days, but I do believe we have the shooter in custody." He goes on to say a prayer for Erica Kirk and those two beautiful babies. Of course, Kirk leaves behind a wife and two young children. Vance spent time with them yesterday when he traveled from Utah to Arizona on Air Force Two. Kirk is from Arizona. That is where he will be laid to rest. And the president also confirming that he will be attending his funeral.
Natalie Brand with the latest at the White House for us. Natalie, thank you. We want to jump over now and bring in CBS News congressional correspondent Caitlin Huey Burns, who is in our D.C. bureau. Caitlin, President Trump said he wants Tyler Robinson, this 22-year-old, to get the death penalty. President Trump also saying that he does plan to attend the funeral of Charlie Kirk, who, as Natalie just laid out, wasn't just a key political figure for Republicans, but also, a father of two, a husband whose family is deep in grief today. How is this hitting Washington?
Well, Errol, it's important to note that, too, his proximity to the president. He was thought of as a family member to this president, and we've heard so many stories about that. But, Errol, I wanted to highlight what we just heard from the governor of Utah there, Spencer Cox, because I can tell you that we've been on Capitol Hill the past several days talking to lawmakers about what should be the response, how can you tone down the rhetoric, and we really haven't seen many leaders rise to this occasion. And we did see Governor Cox provide an example of some much-needed leadership there. He delivered the facts of the case. He grieved this tragedy and recognized that grief, and also called upon our better angels. And I just want to read a quote from what he said today. This is an attack on all of us, an attack on the American experiment, an attack on our ideals. This cuts to the very foundation of who we are, who we have been, and who we could be. And Errol, he offered a bit of advice that I think all of us can take, should take, which is log off, go touch grass, hug a family member. And I think that is what so many, not only in Washington, are feeling, but across the country, people who have felt so connected to this person, either from social media, from a public perspective, or didn't have any connection to him at all, and are just grieving a horrific shooting at a time that it just feels like this happens too often and shouldn't happen again. And I think the governor really spoke to a range of emotions that people are feeling across this country as a family has lost a father, has lost a husband, a son, and I think the governor is someone to watch as we move forward in the lack of real politics kind of taking hold here. He noted that there is an off-ramp if we choose to take it. It's a choice.
Caitlin, it's a great point. The governor's saying that he believes this is a turning point in the United States, but the reality of that is up to Americans to decide. Caitlin Huey-Burns, my thanks to you and to Scott McFarlane and Natalie Brand for our continuing breaking news coverage. On the news now that 22-year-old Tyler Robinson, accused of assassinating conservative activist Charlie Kirk, now in custody. Stay right where you are. Mugo Odigwe continues our coverage live from San Francisco. Mugo.
Thank you, Errol. And we're going to stay with that breaking news into the investigation on the fatal shooting of conservative activist and Turning Point USA co-founder Charlie Kirk. Officials say they now have a suspect in custody. President Donald Trump was the first to break that news just this morning. The person in custody has been identified as 22-year-old Tyler Robinson. And here's the FBI with much more on his arrest.
On the evening of September 11th, a family member of Tyler Robinson reached out to a family friend who contacted the Washington County Sheriff's Office with information that Robinson had confessed to them or implied that he had committed the incident. This information was relayed to the Utah County Sheriff's Office and scene investigators at Utah Valley University. This information was also conveyed to the FBI. Investigators reviewed additional video footage from UVU surveillance and identified Robinson arriving on UVU campus in a gray Dodge Challenger at approximately 8:29 a.m. on September 10th, in which he is observed on video in a plain maroon t-shirt, light-colored shorts, a black hat with a white logo, and light-colored shoes. When encountered in person by investigators in Washington County on September 12th, in the early morning hours, Robinson was observed in consistent clothing with those surveillance images.
Now, this major development comes after the FBI ramped up their investigation yesterday, releasing never-before-seen pictures and videos of the person of interest. The first video there shows the moment the suspected gunman climbed off the roof and fled the scene moments after the fatal shooting. Let's go to CBS News national security contributor Sam Vinograd. Sam, thank you for joining us today. What stood out to you from that news conference with FBI officials?
Well, the news conference with law enforcement officials from all levels of government really proved to walk the public through the details of the investigatory process. We learned that this individual confessed to a family member. That family member then contacted a friend, and that friend then contacted law enforcement. So the role of this individual's family and friends was critical in bringing this individual into custody. We also learned a little bit about the arc of this individual's radicalization and mobilization to violence. Family members reportedly told law enforcement that this individual was filled with hate, for example. We also learned that this individual was communicating with his roommate, allegedly over Discord, about the location of the rifle itself. Now investigators will be combing through evidence, forensic evidence, evidence from interviews with witnesses, friends and family, to try to ascertain whether this individual was in touch with anyone else about his plans. Was he trying to inspire anyone else to take similar action? Did anyone help him plan this attack? And if along the way this horrific assassination could have been prevented in any way. But coming out of the press conference, there were some conflicting information about whether there will be additional arrests and whether there is an ongoing threat to the public. Hopefully that's not the case, Muga.
Yeah, and Sam, we're also learning more information about the words engraved on shell casings in the gun that the suspect used. So take a listen and we'll get your take on the other side of things.
Investigators noted inscriptions that had been engraved on casings found with the rifle. Inscriptions on a fired casing read, "Notices, bulges, capital O-W-O, what's this, question mark." Inscriptions on the 3 unfired casings read, "Hey fascist, exclamation point, catch, exclamation point." Up arrow symbol, right arrow and symbol, and 3 down arrow symbols. A second unfired casing read, Oh, Bella Ciao, Bella Ciao, Bella Ciao, Ciao, Ciao. And a third unfired casing read, if you read this, you are gay, LMAO.
And so, Sam, you heard that there. When we see cases like this, shootings like this, the big question is always why. So what do you think that says about motive in this case?
Well, in the press conference, we heard about the engravings on the casings. We also heard about statements the suspect reportedly made to family members about hate for Charlie Kirk. So the combination of what's written on the engravings and the alleged statements that were made to family members would lead us to believe that the motive here was political violence, political hatred. But investigators will have to continue doing their work to say that with certainty, but that certainly does look to be the case at this point.
Okay. Sam Vinograd, thank you so much for joining us. Now, CBS News correspondent Carter Evans is in Utah and was at that press conference. Carter, what stood out to you about this?
Well, you know, first I want to pick up on something that Sam said about motive, because I asked the governor if he was cooperating and talking with authorities, and he said he couldn't discuss that. Then I asked him if he talked about a motive, and he said he wouldn't discuss that either. Yes, of course, his political leanings were certainly part of this, but what was it exactly that drove him to go find that gun, get in the car, drive 250 miles north, and actually follow through with this crime? And that's one thing that we still have unanswered right now. What we do know is that authorities have a tremendous amount of evidence linking him to this crime. Of course, they have the gun, they have all of this video evidence. I would presume at this point they've probably got fingerprints and DNA. FBI Director Kash Patel mentioned how they had flown that evidence back to Quantico to be tested right away, and so it looks like they have a handle on that right now. The question that I have, and another question that I asked the governor, was about these Discord messages. He mentioned that the suspect here had been communicating with his roommate over Discord about the gun, and actually asked him to go retrieve the gun in this wooded area where we know authorities found it. When did that happen? Did that happen on the day of the shooting? Did that individual report it to police? Could they be considered an accomplice? You know, I asked the governor that, and they said right now they presume he acted alone, but this investigation is still ongoing, and they've got a lot of evidence to go through right now. So those are a couple of questions that I have. Also, they mentioned that 11,000 tips came in. That's a lot, and they've been following up on a lot. They have an army of people here to follow up on this. And I'm curious, were they on his trail already? Or was it just simply that he turned himself in? Either way, he's in custody right now, but that's some answers that I would like to have, and we'll probably get them next week when we get these charging documents. They've got 3 days to put those together, and then we'll see a preliminary hearing next week, and we're going to get a lot of information there.
Oh, yeah, I'm sure we will. And Carter, I want to stay on that because we heard from FBI officials during that news conference that it was, you know, the father who persuaded the suspect to turn himself in. And then he also mentioned just now that they've got so many tips on this case. But again, it does seem like having that relative push the suspect to come forward really helped officials arrest him, right?
Right. But you know, what were those tips that came in? I mean, you saw those images that they released, especially the enhanced ones last night. I mean, he was wearing sunglasses, but, you know, those pictures were so clear that if you knew that person, I mean, you'd be able to recognize them right away. So I'm wondering if some of those tips came in were people who were saying, I know who this guy is, and here's where he lives. So were they hot on his trail? I mean, with all the information that was coming in and all the evidence they had, it's likely they were already on his trail.
Wow. Yeah. CBS News correspondent Carter Evans, thank you so much for your time today. And CBS News Justice correspondent Scott McFarland joins us now for much more. Scott, what have we heard from the Justice Department so far about all of this?
This is going to shift from a federal investigation into a federal prosecution, potentially over the course of the weekend and into early next week. You'll get a criminal information, a charging document initially charging Tyler Robinson, potentially with multiple federal felonies. Then there's a preliminary hearing and a detention hearing where the Department of Justice will make an argument to the judge as to why they want Tyler Robinson held in pretrial detention pending trial in the case that's almost certainly going to happen from the Department of Justice's purview. The investigation was both local and federal in nature. You had the state governor, you had state Department of Public Safety officers there, you had the federal investigators there, and the FBI too. So this was a multi-level, multi-layer investigation, so it's also possible there's some local charges filed here. Carter mentioned the 11,000 tips and the open-ended question whether any one of them was distinctively helpful in this case, or whether this simply was a person who confessed to a family member, who turned to a family friend, who turned to law enforcement. And though those questions weren't declaratively answered today, we could find out more when those court proceedings begin as early as Monday.
And Scott, I think it's safe to say there were some missteps with the FBI from the very beginning, especially when we have FBI Director Kash Patel, who took to social media and said, hey, we've arrested a suspect. That obviously turned out to not be the case. We know the Trump administration gutted much of the FBI. So how has that influenced these investigations, if it even has at all?
Well, it's led to criticism of the FBI director, who has been taking heat publicly and, of all places, on social media for the communication strategy used in the initial hours. The FBI director, who you heard from during the news conference, Kash Patel, had posted Wednesday night on social media that a subject was in custody for this shooting. Later, he had to post about 90 minutes later that that person had been released and was not connected to the shooting. But any of this happening on social media before law enforcement was to announce it in a more traditional setting, that's a change. And there's been criticism that if you announce somebody's in custody prematurely or incorrectly, you give a false sense of security to the public, which is a problem. Now, the president going on cable TV this morning to be the first to announce an arrest, that's untraditional as well, to put it mildly. Doesn't mean there's any issue there, but legal analysts immediately responded saying that is fodder for pretrial motions about jury pools, about defense strategy. All of that is a variable. We're not sure how that plays out because this is the first time that's ever happened.
Certainly is. Scott McFarland, thank you. Now, as we mentioned earlier, President Trump was the first to break the news of a suspect being in custody for the fatal shooting of conservative activist Charlie Kirk. You heard Scott talk about that. Here's a bit of what the president had to say.
I think with a high degree of certainty, we have him in custody, right? In custody. Everyone did a great job. We worked with the local police, the governor, everybody did a great job. Well, I hope he's going to be found guilty, I would imagine, and I hope he gets the death penalty. What he did, Charlie Kirk was the finest person. He didn't deserve this.
CBS News correspondent Natalie Brand is following all of this for us from the White House. Natalie, what else did the president say about this shooting?
Yeah, Mugo, he went into detail about what he knew about the investigation, the suspect being taken into custody before it was announced in that news conference. And that really speaks to the closeness of the relationship between the President of the United States and Charlie Kirk, who he really described as kind of a member of the family. He had a direct line to President Trump. He was a close ally, advisor, and friend, and that started years ago on the campaign trail. President Trump really crediting Kirk for helping to mobilize, turn out young conservative voters. And I just can't overstate just the grief that has overtaken the White House this week. And, you know, the president giving more details about when he learned about the shooting, and also confirming this morning that he will attend Kirk's funeral in Arizona.
And we know Kirk's casket was flown from Utah to Arizona just yesterday on Air Force Two. Can you talk to us about the significance of that moment?
Yeah, the Vice President, J.D. Vance, went to social media late Wednesday night and really detailed the closeness of the relationship and the friendship he had with Kirk. He credits Kirk for helping to launch his political career, for advocating for him to become Trump's running mate. So he personally flew to Salt Lake City yesterday, changing plans. He was supposed to be at a 9/11 remembrance and instead went to Salt Lake to meet Kirk's family, wife, and personally fly the casket from Utah to Arizona, where Kirk lived, where his political group Turning Point USA was headquartered, and where he will be laid to rest. The vice president reacting to the breaking news this morning on social media. I think you saw that social media post. He called this a big breakthrough, but also went on to say that in some ways the investigation is still in its early days, but I do believe we have the shooter in custody. And he ends by saying, say a prayer for Erica Kirk and those two beautiful babies. You know, everyone, really an outpouring of support and condolences to the wife and young children that Kirk leaves behind.
Natalie, I want to go back to that press conference really quickly. The governor of Utah talked about political violence. What did he have to say?
Yeah, and Governor Cox earlier this week, in the hours after the shooting, said the nation seems broken right now. And he really stressed that message again this morning after news was revealed about the arrest, saying that, you know, the very act that Charlie championed, freedom of expression, having his life taken in that very act makes it more difficult for people to feel like they can share ideas. Calling this an attack on all of us, you know, an attack on the ideals of democracy. And he compared this time to the late 60s, the political violence and turmoil of that period, and also had a message for younger people saying, you know, we are at a turning point here. Let's take a listen to what he had to say in his own words.
Right now, if I could, I need to talk to the young people in our state, in my state, and all across the country. As President Trump reminded me, he said, you know who really loved Charlie? The youths. And he's right. Young people loved Charlie, and young people hated Charlie. And Charlie went into those places anyway. And these are the words that have helped me. Charlie said, when people stop talking, that's when you get violence. He said, the weak can never forgive. Forgiveness is the attribute of the strong. The only way out of the labyrinth of suffering is to forgive. Welcome without judgment, love without condition, forgive without limit. He said, always forgive your enemies. Nothing annoys them so much. A few months ago, I referenced this last night, Charlie posted to social media, when things are moving very fast and people are losing their minds, it's important to stay grounded. Turn off your phone, read scripture, spend time with friends, and remember, internet fury is not real life. It's going to be okay. He again said, when you stop having a human connection with someone you disagree with, it becomes a lot easier to commit violence. He said, what we as a culture have to get back to is being able to have a reasonable agreement, where violence is not an option. Now, again, to my young friends out there, you are inheriting a country where politics feels like rage. It feels like rage is the only option. But through those words, we have a reminder that we can choose a different path. Your generation.
Governor going on to say that this is our moment. Do we escalate or find an off-ramp? And it comes, Mugo, as you know, we've learned a number of elected officials and lawmakers who are going to have political rallies over the weekend are now choosing to postpone them, trying to come up with security plans in light of just the shock and grief that has really overtaken the nation, Mugo.
Yeah, certainly. Natalie Brand, thank you. Now, former FBI agent Doug Coons joins us live now. Doug, thank you for your time. Officials mentioned Robinson's roommate told law enforcement about messages allegedly from Robinson on Discord. How important will the suspect's online presence be in this case?
It'll be very important. So probably as we speak, search warrants are being executed on not only the physical locations where the subject lives, but also on his phone, his computer, any kind of communication devices. So they will be able to retrieve these messages and find out what discussions were being had up to this point. Was it something that had been being discussed for days, weeks, months leading up to it, or was this, kind of not a spur of the moment decision, but was it a more recent thing? And should anybody then have said something knowing that this was potentially an imminent threat? So there could be other people with exposure still. It'll be interesting to see how it unfolds.
Yeah, and the governor of Utah, Spencer Cox, he talked about the inscriptions on the shell casings found during the investigation. Let's take a listen to what he had to say. Okay, looks like we're having trouble getting that soundbite from the governor. But I just want to ask you, when it comes to that inscription, what exactly does that say to you? How will that be used during this investigation, that information?
As an investigator, I would assume initially that those words had relevance to this individual, and I need to figure out what that was. So in these searches, both of the physical locations and of the electronics, likely we'll find, he ran across these in a book or on an online article or something that had meaning to him that was enough for him to inscribe them on these shell casings. That'll be a big piece of evidence when it comes to the prosecution as well.
Okay, and it looks like we do have that soundbite ready. Let's play it real quick for our viewers.
Investigators noted inscriptions that had been engraved on casings found with the rifle. Inscriptions on a fired casing read, "Notices, bulges, capital OWO, what's this, question mark." Inscriptions on the 3 unfired casings read, "Hey fascist, exclamation point, catch, exclamation point." Up arrow symbol, right arrow and symbol, and 3 down arrow symbols. A second unfired casing read, "Oh Bella Chow, Bella Chow, Bella Chow, Chow Chow." And a third unfired casing read, "If you read this, you are gay, LMAO."
All right, Doug. So again, we heard from officials earlier today during that news conference. They talked about all the tips that they received, but then they also said that they were not looking for additional suspects in this case. But I assume there's a mountain of evidence that they're still sifting through right now. So from your experience, what comes next in this investigation?
Like you said, there's still a lot to do. They've got to get the search warrants executed and all that evidence collected. It's got to be analyzed and processed and basically putting together, hopefully, an airtight case that can be prosecuted if they're seeking the death penalty. That's a big deal. You've got to have all your ducks in a row before you venture into such a thing. And I don't know if he's cooperating, if he's given a statement, or if he's gotten an attorney already. Certainly a confession is very helpful in these things. The parents, that encouraged him, at what point did they know, and good for them for getting him to turn himself in. And going back to one of the previous speakers, I think it was just a matter of time, even without the help from the father and the roommate. I think those pictures were very clear. I think somebody knew him. I think the tips that were coming in, at least some of them, people had to have known who this person was. I think it was a matter of a short time before he was going to be caught anyway.
And this is obviously a very well-known case. It's a big case. From the moment this happened, everyone was paying attention. How difficult, though, is an investigation like this for the FBI?
They're very difficult. Again, what was it, like 11,000 tips came in? And so there's a process, and people take these calls or from the internet or however they come in, and they get filtered, and then they go to another level if they have some sort of legitimacy to them. Some of them are just nonsense. And then they get filtered again. And ultimately, if they're determined important enough, they'll send out an investigator to talk to that person or check out whatever that tip may have been. And when there's that many and you have, fairly limited resources, that means you're bringing in, typically in the FBI case of this magnitude, you would bring in other investigators from other field offices. You're also leveraging your relationships with the state and local agencies. And it's basically all hands on deck covering these tips, because there's just a massive amount, and you have to cover them all. Forget where I was going exactly with that, but it's just a massive amount of work. You've also got all the video footage. There's hundreds of hours of this stuff that has to be viewed by a human being. There are some AI tools that help, but a lot of times it just takes a lot of hours of hard work and sifting through all this stuff to collect all these things.
Yeah. Former FBI agent Doug Coons, thank you so much for your insight today. We appreciate your expertise. And we have much more ahead on this breaking news right here on CBS News 24/7, so stick with us.
What happens when reporters take you inside the story?
I've been asking for over a year and a half for access into this place, and this is the first time we're getting it.
You get the all-new CBS Evening News every weeknight.
This is CBS.
This is NCIS. You put on that uniform, you agree to protect the person next to you, no matter what. Welcome to Australia.
Match made in heaven.
Watch out! Are you hungry? Shout you a crock burger.
NCIS Sydney. All episodes now streaming on Paramount Plus. Returns CBS Full.
I'm Erin Moriarty of 48 Hours, and of all the cases I've covered, this is the one that troubles me most. Listen to Murder in the Orange Grove, the troubled case against Carsley Green, wherever you get your podcasts.
Be in the know, even when you're on the go, with the CBS Mornings podcast.
Some news you can use at the grocery store.
Better mornings start better days.
When you look good, feel good, you do good.
That's right.
Listen to CBS Mornings on the go on Apple Podcasts.
What happens when the world's best journalists come together?
Write a prescription for the healing of America.
We're retired and this is our paradise. Now it's gone.
You get the stories of America every night. You get the all-new CBS Evening News every weeknight.
I can only describe it as evil.
Follow and listen to Train to Kill, The Dog Trainer, The Heiress, and The Bodyguard on the free Odyssey app or wherever you get your podcasts.
My job can get dangerous sometimes, but I'm very good at what I do. I know you're scared. I'm here to help.
They said you were the best.
Your daughter hired me to bring you home. I made her promise I would never stop looking.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hear about the reward?
Come in.
Okay.
Tracker, all episodes now streaming on Paramount Plus and returning CBS Fall.
We continue following that breaking news in the investigation into the fatal shooting of conservative activist Charlie Kirk. Officials say a suspect is now in custody, and he has been identified as 22-year-old Tyler Robinson. Here's the moment the FBI announced his arrest.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. We got him. On the evening of September 11th, a family member of Tyler Robinson reached out to a family friend who contacted the Washington County Sheriff's Office with information that Robinson had confessed to them or implied that he had committed the incident. This information was relayed to the Utah County Sheriff's Office and scene investigators at Utah Valley University. This information was also conveyed to the FBI. Investigators reviewed additional video footage from UVU surveillance and identified Robinson arriving on UVU campus in a gray Dodge Challenger at approximately 8:29 a.m. on September 10th, in which he is observed on video in a plain maroon t-shirt, light-colored shorts, a black hat with a white logo, and light-colored shoes. When encountered in person by investigators in Washington County on September 12th, in the early morning hours, Robinson was observed in consistent clothing with those surveillance images. Investigators interviewed a family member of Robinson who stated that Robinson had become more political in recent years. The family member referenced a recent incident in which Robinson came to dinner prior to September 10th, and in the conversation with another family member, Robinson mentioned Charlie Kirk was coming to UVU. They talked about why they didn't like him and the viewpoints that he had. The family member also stated Kirk was full of hate and spreading hate. The family member also confirmed Robinson had a gray Dodge Challenger. Investigators identified an individual as the roommate of Robinson. Investigators interviewed that roommate, who stated that his roommate, referring to Robinson, made a joke on Discord. Investigators asked if he would show them the messages on Discord. He opened it and showed several messages to investigators and allowed investigators to take photos of the screen as each message was shown by Robinson's roommate. These photos consisted of various messages, including content of messages between the phone contact named Tyler with an emoji icon and Robinson's roommate's device. The content of these messages included messages affiliated with the contact Tyler, stating a need to retrieve a rifle from a drop point, leaving the rifle in a bush, messages related to visually watching the area where a rifle was left, and a message referring to having left the rifle wrapped in a towel. The messages also refer to engraving bullets and a mention of a scope and the rifle being unique. Messages from the contact Tyler also mentioned that he had changed outfits.
Now let's bring in CBS News senior coordinating producer for the Crime and Public Safety Unit, Anna Schechter. Anna, what is the latest reporting we have right now about all of this?
Well, we just were listening to those very interesting details about communications between the roommate and Robinson, the suspect. Currently talking about the gun, the fact that Robinson was telling him, I dropped the gun in the bushes, you need to go and get it, and describing the gun wrapped in a towel, which authorities told us yesterday that's how it was found. I also have some new reporting about how it came about that Robinson turned himself in. His father recognized him from the photos we can report and confronted his son. His son admitted to the father, according to law enforcement sources, that he had been the one who carried out the assassination. And at that point, the father contained him. The father went to the youth pastor who engaged with the U.S. Marshals. They had a prior relationship, and the Marshals were able to take Robinson into custody. So we're piecing together this puzzle of exactly what happened late last night and the very early hours of this morning. Essentially, all of this happened overnight following a late night press conference where authorities still didn't even have a name of a suspect, and they were asking the public for help.
And I want to stick with that for a second, because they said they had, 11,000 tips that came in about this suspect. But then you have to wonder if the suspect had not talked to his roommate, and if he hadn't talked to his father, and then the father to the pastor, and then to the U.S. Marshal. Do you think we would be hearing about an arrest today?
We would be in a very different situation if his father had not recognized him from these photos. Had law enforcement not put out these photos, we could be looking at days. We don't know what he might have done. Now, we don't know if the roommate would have subsequently turned him in, or somebody else might have recognized him from those photos. But the fact that his own father recognized him in those photos was instrumental to law enforcement wrapping up this manhunt in under 36 hours, which is pretty quick when you think about how much time he had to flee. He had already driven 300 miles south of the university. So, he was long gone, and it's unclear if investigators were even searching in southern Utah. So it really came down to his father identifying him and confronting him.
Yeah, and earlier when we talked to Carter Evans, we also heard that news conference where he asked officials, like, they did not exactly give an answer there, but just how important, when it comes to the weapon that officials say they found, how important is that evidence, and will it be crucial as this case moves forward?
It is crucial. It's a great question, Mugo. There is a reason that the governor is almost laying out this prosecutorial case. He's putting out there into the public record that Robinson wrote on Discord. There is a written record of him telling his roommate where to retrieve the weapon used in the assassination, that it was wrapped in a towel, that it was in the bush. We're going to see all of this laid out in charging documents early next week for sure. And he essentially gave us a preview of what we're going to be seeing in those charging documents, and we can expect Utah state charges as well as federal charges, and it appears to me that both are seeking the death penalty.
Wow. All right, Anna Schechter, thank you so much for your time. We always appreciate your insight. Let's go now to our Salt Lake City affiliate, KUTV, from outside of the suspect's home. Take a listen to their reporting.
I think people are coming here to see this house because this news just came out, what his name is, and people are finding this information online of where he lived. It really seems like neighbors in the area in Washington are coming to get a look at this house and see if they knew anyone in the area, and just to kind of be a part of this conversation and to have something like this happen in Washington City. I think that it's really shocking for a lot of people here.
Yeah, and that also brings up the concern, sometimes people connected to a suspect can get a lot of ridicule. It can be dangerous. They can get threats. So that part of it is not really healthy, in terms of showing where he lived or his family lives.
Well, of course, we want to be careful with that. I mean, this morning, prior to that press conference where the name was specifically released, this name, Tyler Robinson, was floating around online. We did not report that until it was specifically confirmed that he was in custody by Governor Cox. So we know that he is not here and that there's no physical threat to him here. We have not seen any family members come in or out of the house. But this is a small neighborhood, and I actually just spoke with a neighbor here who lives a few blocks over, who said that when they heard about this, they looked at their kid's yearbook and they actually found his photo, and it became apparent that their kids did go to school with this suspect, with Tyler Robinson. So people in the community, it's very quick to kind of put some things together. He said that, this neighbor I spoke to said that he did go to church with his parents, and that's really his extent of knowing the family, but he was able to look in his kid's yearbook, find his photo, and this is someone in the community.
Yeah, it's heartbreaking for a lot of people, including the family of a suspect like this. So, and they did help get him put in jail.
Well, and all along, they've been saying, please be peaceful. Don't be angry at whoever did this. We can't overreact. We need to act instead of react in a violent manner, and hopefully that will stay peaceful in that neighborhood there. We see more people behind you there.
Yeah, it looks like a lot of people driving by.
And that reporting is from our Salt Lake City affiliate, KUTV, just outside the suspect home. And we have much more news ahead right here on CBS News 24/7, so stay with us. We'll be right back.
What happens when you get conversation over conflict?
I think they've taught me to have grace and compassion.
When we follow the human side of the headline.
I'm not asking that we ignore disability, rather that we do not ignore ability.
When news takes you where the story happens.
We've just crossed into Lebanon.
When the world's best journalists come together to cover your world, you get the all-new CBS Evening News. every weeknight. It's the most popular F word in Washington, fraud.
Is it true that the Social Security number of just about every single American is available for sale on the dark web?
An eye-opening 60 Minutes report.
That's chilling.
It's time for 60 Minutes.
Your life is still a mystery.
When your gut tells you something fishy's going on, there's almost always a 4-day-old carp lying around somewhere. Finishing this is the only thing that's important to me. Either way, the truth is coming out.
Heading home? Who the hell are you, Madeline Matlock?
Matlock. All episodes now streaming on Paramount Plus and returning CBS Fall.
Sunday morning, we hail a driverless taxi, plus billionaire Barry Diller's revealing new memoir, and when trash becomes art, this Sunday morning.
Politics isn't a game. When do consumers actually get to touch and feel a difference in their lives? Politics is about policy. So you would encourage Democrats to work with Donald Trump on an issue like health care? I'm a voracious consumer of information, and I'm impatient. I don't like to be spun. Do you know if there are active terror cells in the United States right now? To be moderator of Face the Nation means bringing the most powerful stakeholders to the table to become better informed.
It was almost like being face-to-face with the devil.
48 hours reports. I fought and fought.
911 reported your emergency.
She disappeared off the face of the earth.
Stream 48 hours, 24/7.
Elspeth! Oh, I thought I saw you. And then I thought, well, who else could it be? Dressed as a member of the Lollipop Guild.
I work with the police. I like my outlandish theories with a heavy dose of evidence. Nice alibi, by the way.
Can you be careful with that?
Whoever did this is still out there. And I do love a mystery.
Elsbeth. All episodes now streaming on Paramount Plus and returning CBS Fall.
Breaking news this morning, officials in Utah announced they caught the man suspected of killing Charlie Kirk. This is the mugshot of 22-year-old Tyler Robinson. Officials say he was not a student at Utah Valley University where Charlie Kirk was speaking at the time of the shooting. Meanwhile, Michigan Lieutenant Governor Garland Gilchrist says a credible bomb threat was made against his home yesterday. He released a statement saying, in part, the purpose of this violence is to silence, intimidate, and eliminate people and their voices from our society. That will not work on me. We cannot let this remain our reality. In Pennsylvania, Governor Josh Shapiro called on President Trump to set the tone in the U.S. by condemning political violence following the death of Charlie Kirk. Earlier this year, Shapiro's residence was set on fire in an alleged political assassination attempt. He told our CBS Morning News that he is not backing down in his calls to Trump.
I am not going to be deterred by anyone or any threat or any action like what my family and I experienced back in April. I'm going to continue to do my job and work even harder. Just yesterday, I was in Pittsburgh for a series of public events, including one with hundreds of people who attended. So I'm not going to be deterred. I am not afraid, and I'm going to keep pressing forward. And when you see leaders across this country being gunned down, you see leaders across this country being attacked, I think we are at a pivotal moment in this country, and we need leaders to step up and speak and act with moral clarity, not to use the rhetoric of vengeance, but to use words of healing.
And in Florida, today is day 2 in the trial of the man accused of attempting to assassinate then presidential candidate Donald Trump. Prosecutors say Ryan Ruth camped out in bushes for hours with a rifle while Trump golfed nearby at his West Palm Beach Country Club. CBS News legal reporter Katrina Kaufman details what we've heard so far in the trial and what we can expect today.
We're continuing to hear from witnesses today.
4 more FBI agents, and then another witness from the Palm Beach Sheriff's Office. Yesterday, we heard from 5 witnesses already, 2 Secret Service agents who were at Trump's golf course on the day of this incident when Ryan Ruth allegedly attempted to assassinate President Donald Trump. We also heard from 2 FBI agents who were part of the arrest that day and of getting Ruth's car from the scene, and then from a man who just happened to be driving by the golf course when he heard shots fired. He ended up helping law enforcement identify Ruth and his vehicle that day. Now, Ruth is defending himself in this trial, and it has been very unconventional so far. He got cut off by the judge while giving his opening statement, which she said was just not relevant. It was very poetic